developer, there wouldn't have been any security bugs in the first place. And I learned a very valuable lesson as a software developer that day, and that was hide from the security team whenever possible. But if you fast forward a few years from then, I became a web app pen tester. And then I knew how to do all sorts of fancy tricks. And then I figured out that that person had no idea what he was talking about. And rather than admit to me, I don't know what this means either, let's look into it together, instead he's like, I will shame her so she doesn't ask any more questions so she doesn't know I don't know. And with that, I want to talk about insecurity and information technology. That's what this talk is going to be about. Please allow me to do the About Me slides, which the sole purpose of is to hope that I impress you and then you listen to my ideas for the rest of the talk. So this is me. Sometimes this is me. I'm Tanya Janka. And on the internet, sometimes I'm called She Hacks Purple. And I work for this little startup. You might have heard of us. We're called Microsoft. And I am something called a cloud developer advocate. And this is what I thought too when I was first told about this job. It means that I do like a bunch of interesting things. So my job's really cool. I help them change their stuff so it's what people actually want. And I get to do research like this talk and release it. And I just basically advocate for developers, just try to make things usable, specifically from a security standpoint. And it's just like, you're going to pay me for that? What? I was doing it for free. So I'm an application security evangelist, but I'm not like that guy. I'm more like this guy. Really, I'm the happy OWASP person. I'm an ethical hacker because I need to know. Can I make it do what I want it to do instead of what you want it to do? I'm totally obsessed with this thing called OWASP. Who here was at the OWASP meeting on Wednesday night? Yeah! You have an OWASP chapter in the city and they're completely awesome. You're really lucky. It's big and organized and they have beer. I'm so obsessed that let me tell you what it is. So the Open Web Application Security Project, there's like 300,000 nerds all over the world that are obsessed with the security of software. And we have meetings and we create tools and we do projects and we do all this stuff for free because we want all of our collective loved ones to be able to use the internet safely. And I'm so obsessed that I help run the chapter in my city. And I started a project called DevSlop, about sloppy DevOps, and how to turn DevOps into DevSecOps. And I've been coding for like a long time. I'm told that I don't look my age, and that's why I'm telling you it. And I have like this weird, crazy career goal that I wanted to actually be easy to do security. Isn't that crazy? Right now, if you want something to be secure, if you want to make a secure app, you have to do 5,000 extra things. I want the easy way, whatever way you were going to do the thing, to be the secure way. I want it to be hard to do something insecurely. And right now, I think it's really hard for developers to make secure software. So I feel that's like a lot about me, and instead, we should talk about everyone else. I want to talk about what developers do that can make security teams feel a little bit insecure. I really like memes. So what do developers do sometimes that I have experienced since I moved to security that make me sad? Sometimes they're like, let's not ask the security team for help. Instead, I'm going to write my own crypto. I base64 encoded it twice, it's secure! Besides not asking advice, sometimes they won't let me test, they won't give me time, they won't give me a place. They're like, I don't have time for that. Really? Do you have time for a breach? Because it sounds like that's what, you don't want me to look at all. Sometimes they won't cooperate. So I want to do security testing, or I want to look at something, or I'm like, can we talk about your design? And they're just like, I can talk to you after release 1, which, yeah, and sometimes they just claim they have more important things to do. This is basically, okay, so they hide from us, like literally and figuratively, which is like the biggest problem for me as a security person, because like the developers know the answers about their apps and I need you. So what do security people do to developers that makes developers want to run and hide? Well, we send them automated reports, like reports from automated scanners or whatever, that we haven't read, or we haven't validated, and we just email it to them. Like, it's not important enough for me to read, but it's important enough for them to read. And we send them false positives sometimes. Sometimes we don't give usable security advice. Who here's heard of NIST? It's like a standard in America. So in Canada, we have something called ITSG 33. It's like a swear word. And I've had security teams where, like, you know, the Java developer writes us and they're like, I'm doing this thing in Java, like, how do I do it? And they send them a link to the 1,000-page policy. And I'm like, why didn't you just take a picture of you doing this? Because that's what you basically just did. Like, they asked you for help, and in my opinion, you just turned them away. Right? So that's not helpful. And sometimes they're seen as a gate, like they're slowing down security, down the system development lifecycle, and sometimes you'll be in a project and they'll add requirements, and you're like, why are you adding those? And they'll say, because security, like developers aren't smart enough to know, right? And as we saw on the very first slide, sometimes they can be a little insensitive when they tell you the results of their security testing and make you feel a little bit like they think that you're not an awesome developer, and that's not a good way to make friends. And I wrote this whole talk because 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, my dad said, Tanya, it's 2016. Why can't we make secure software by now? Can you just go fix that? Yes, Dad, I'll get right on it. He's like, well, why? And I was like, well, it's this stuff. This is part of the reason why. Like, if we can't talk to each other. So I started looking into it. And so all of these things make people feel insecure in how they do their jobs. And when I looked into it, it turned out that social scientists have looked into this for 1 million years. When you feel insecure about your jobs, it leads to predictably bad behavior. So like my research session was like one Google search to prove my hypothesis, and I was like, yes. Which is why it's only like the first 4 minutes of the talk. The predictably bad behavior is deviant behavior. Do you want people deviating from those nice processes that you just made for them to follow? That's not good, right? People feel insecure and they have moral disengagement. You don't want people who are feeling a bit flexible with their morals, who might not be very pleased with you handling sensitive data. That does not sound ideal. We have reduced job involvement. People who are not going to stay late to fix that last thing, or to search that last part of functionality to make sure they have complete test coverage. You have risk-taking behavior, and in a group full of security people, I don't think I need to explain why that one's bad. And then you have the weird one, organizational citizenship behavior. So this is positive workplace activity that you do. I'm going to explain it with an analogy though, because when I read that, I was like, what? So imagine you're in the kitchen. You are by yourself. No one else is there. You've realized you're the only one, and you are pouring coffee, and you spill a little bit on the counter. So if you have good organizational citizenship behavior, the first thing you'll do is you'll grab a paper towel and you'll wipe it up. And if you feel very invested in your workplace, this is a place that you respect. You feel a part of it. If there's water on the counter, you'll just wipe it all down because why not, right? Like paper towels in my hand. But if you have poor organizational citizenship behavior, what you are going to do is you're going to leave the coffee because this isn't my problem, that's the other guy's fault, etc. And that person is not going to have fantastic code, that person is not going to be a great security team member, and if you have these two teams fighting against each other all the time with this bad behavior, in my opinion, it's part of the reason we end up with insecure software. This is my hypothesis of the whole talk. And I hope you agree with me, because the rest of the talk's just how we can solve this problem. Because that's the part I consider interesting of every talk. Like, here's this bug I found, but here's what I can do with it. So, let's just talk about solutions. Yes. Is everyone awake still? Who just like wave? Yes! Thank you, I really appreciate that. So, let's talk about what we could do. So, on the next slide, I'm going to have words. And I know the first thing everyone does when they see words is they read the words, because I used to only have words on my slides, and I was told that was not acceptable. And that people like pictures, so it's going to have words, but I'm going to read it with you, so you don't have to rush ahead, but you can if you want. Okay, so here's the plan. I've made a two-part plan, and we're just going to dissect the plan for the rest of the talk with ideas. So we're going to support our dev team and our security team and the rest of IT with processes, training, resources, so they have all the things they need to get their job done well and know they do it well. And then we're going to initiate and maintain culture change. Sounds easy, right? Don't worry, I have like over 20 ideas of how we can do it. So let's start with processes. I have worked at places where one place I had to do 21 separate steps to get approval to run one scan. Like, I'm not launching a nuke, guys. Sometimes they would have me have people 4 levels above me in the organization to approve something I did as part of my everyday work. They'd have to call Bill Gates out of retirement, ask him if Tony can do this boring thing. He's like, why are you calling me? I'm just kidding. But processes like that don't work, right? It's really hard to get things done, and it's really discouraging for employees if they do all of these things, right? Like, my boss's 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 boss does not care if I'm running a scan. The person you want to talk to is like the person's database I might be impacting, right? So this is about having processes that work. And with that, my #1 thing I think you should do. I think people should get an AppSec team, including this baby. This baby thinks so too. Okay, so application security, or AppSec, as I call it for short, it's the security of software. So an AppSec team would be the part of your security team that actually understands how to make secure software. If you don't have one and you work in a big enterprise, I feel that you need one. Right? Like, if you work at a startup with 4 people, you're not going to have an AppSec team. But if you work at a place like where I work, we have a whole bunch of those teams. If you work at a big enterprise or like a government department, if you have like 400 developers, you should have some AppSec people dedicated to making sure your software is secure. And that's whether they're doing code reviews or they're teaching developers about security or they're adding automated security tests, like negative unit tests, to your DevOps pipeline. These people should be all over your developers and helping them make secure apps. I'm not sure how many of you read the Verizon breach report, but you should totally read the summary. And the past 2 years, the #1 cause of breaches is insecure software, right? I think it was 26% one year, and then it was 40 the other year. If you look at your budget for software, you better, if you look at your budget for security, a huge percentage, like 25 to 40%, is not allocated to AppSec. So you can take that amount and hire this team. So next, I have a job for that AppSec team you just hired. The first thing you want to do is you want to start loaning them out to people doing giant projects. Some people call this the partnership model. And that's where basically this person will follow the SDLC with your team, and every time they need something to do with security, this person handles it. They might go back into the security team and get the person that knows the answer to that thing. They might brainstorm with you or look over your design with you and try to help you solve problems. But rather than you going to various different groups within the security team, you have this one person who can help you. And you should not assign this person to 25 different projects so they become a huge bottleneck, because there's a bunch more work they need to do. I would say 3 projects is good, 3 big projects at a time. But this is how I got introduced to AppSec, and I really liked it. And they do it at a lot of places now, the partnership model or matrixing. So this is my favorite thing. We should start security earlier, sometimes known as pushing left. Formalize security steps as part of your system development lifecycle. Right? If you're trying to make software and you don't have any actual security steps as part of making your software, like if you have a project with a really tight timeline and you have no time dedicated to any security activities, do you think they're going to happen? Probably not. Right? No one's going to do like a big code review or anything like that because they won't have time to do it. You won't have resources to do it. They'll be late and they'll blame security, when really it's like, no, you need to plan this. So if you can add steps like a bit at a time to your system development lifecycle, this will really help. Another thing that we can do is break security activities into smaller pieces. I've worked at a lot of places where they're like, oh, I need to do a secure code review, so everyone like code freeze for 3 weeks while I go do this. Or I'm going to do a pen test, we'll be back to you in like 4 or 5 weeks with results. It's not super realistic anymore. Like with people doing Devops and Agile and sprinting, the security team actually needs to sprint too. And we can do this by doing smaller security activities. So if you're going to do static code analysis, you don't have to scan the entire code base. You could just scan the new feature, right? You could scan just the parts that have changed. Or you could, for each sprint that your developers do, you could scan for just cross-site scripting, let's say one time, and then the next time just injection vulnerabilities, and just go like that and cut up the vulnerabilities in pieces. And then you just hand them a whole bunch of bugs that are the exact same. One person could just like bang them all out. We have to keep pace with developers. This is my favorite meme. I made it. I don't always validate my VA results, but when I do it in production. I think we should never ever send results from a security tool to developers that we have not read and ensure that everything is not false positive. Everything needs to be a true positive that's in there. When you hand a developer a false positive, you are ruining all trust that they ever had in the security team. Because you have a web proxy, or you have a scanner, you have all these tools, and you have background to go look for this. Well, the developer doesn't have those things. And they're like, the security person told me there's these 10 things wrong, and I've been chasing down one of them for like 3 weeks, and I can't find anything. And when they realize that you've handed them a false positive, and you've wasted days and days and days of their time, from now on, every result you send them is in question. And when I say validate, I don't mean press the validate button. I know that some scanners have, apparently if you pay enough for them, they have a button that says validate. It's not what I mean. I mean like manually testing to make sure that it's actually there. Because no matter how expensive the tool is, sometimes there's false positives. That's just the way life is. And there's false negatives. Let's talk about training. When I talk about training, I don't mean don't click on this link or general IT security awareness training. I mean that if you are a coder, I mean that you would have secure coding training. Or if you are an architect, like you design applications, you design systems, threat modeling training or secure design training, right? Like you want to make sure that people get the training so they actually know how to do what they're doing. Because I don't know how it is in Sweden, but I know in North America, when you go to university or college for computer science, they don't teach you security. Like, there might be one class, but it's cursory. Or lame, I think is another word. Like you don't learn the OWASP top 10, you don't learn how to sanitize inputs really well. Like these are basic things that I would love to have every developer know. So let's talk about real training. Okay, so first off, you don't have to know everything. See how this guy's stressed? It's because he thinks he needs to know everything. Before I was in security as a developer, and sometimes I would get that weird feeling of, I can't let anyone know I don't know that. But you can, actually. You can be like, I don't know the answer, I'll get back to you on that. You can do that, and you can ask for training, right? Like if there's a thing that you do all day, and you're like, you know what, things are changing, I want to brush up on this. There's not always money for training, I know this, but there's tons of free stuff on the internet now. Like, when I went to school, because I'm old, the internet was just beginning. We didn't even have Google, which meant we'd have to look through like pages and pages and pages of just like random things that had nothing to do with what you looked for. That was almost all porn. But now you can be like, I want to know, like, I have cross-site scripting in my app. What do I do about this? And then like you look and there'll be like 10,000 people trying to help you fix it, right? So don't feel like you need to know everything. That's the first step. Second step, what if we gave security lessons to everyone in IT? Right? What if we taught them what we wanted them to know instead of making them guess? What if they're free? This is me and my friend Nicole giving free training to developers in Switzerland last month. And we had 100 people came and we just showed them how to hack apps. We're like, let's spend 3 hours just punching this app Nicole made in the face. We taught everyone how to break into the bank, and we taught them how to run a scanner, and everyone's like, I'm gonna run back to work and do this. I'm like, after you ask your boss's permission. Please don't get fired because of us. But like tons of developers came in, and people want to know this, so if you teach them this, a lot of them will be excited about it. Another thing I would have to say is don't stop. I was talking to some people once and they're like, we gave those developers training and they still write crappy apps. I'm like, when? 2012. Oh, that's a long time ago. Do you think anything's changed since then? Do you think you've had some employee turnover? I think maybe they forgot. So please don't stop. Job shadowing is a really good way to learn new things, but when I suggest this, I'm not really necessarily thinking of it in a nice way. I learned about incident management because a really bad incident happened. And I was not supposed to be involved, and I was on the phone call for some other reason. And then I went and looked at the thing, and I'm like, hey, I can read that. And they're like, what? I'm like, I'm a nerd. That's just obfuscated code. It looks like SQL injection. They're like, wait, what? And then I was on the security team. But it got me super addicted to security. So a way that you can convince the teams to work a little better together is if you invite each other to do job shadowing. It sounds crazy, but it's really amazing, and it's a great way to recruit to the security team. Case in point. Resources. A lot of people tell me they're like, you know, we have the best intentions, but we have like one AppSec person and like 2,000 developers. Or we have this great team of security people, but none of them have had any training, and also none of them have any tools, and we don't want people to like try to get, it's the expression blood from a stone. Like, let's make it possible. So the first resource I would want to give to developers would be a web app security standard. What is that? It's like a 8 to 10 page document about how you can make a secure app. Like what the security team actually wants from you. Imagine if we just told them the answers. What if we just told them, if you follow these 10 pages worth of ideas, like if you're gonna do a file upload, here's the stuff we're gonna look for. Like we expect you to have it done like this. And then we write it in developer words. So instead of saying your session token should be ephemeral. That's a security word. That's not a developer word. And it's vague. It means short-lived. Don't give a developer a vague requirement because you're gonna get a vague result. You wanna say, after 5 minutes of idle time, session IDs expire, or 15 minutes, or whatever it is that you want. Right? Like be super specific. And then you'll have a whole bunch of apps that look like that. And then when you go to test, you take this thing that you just made and you test to it. Right? Like, so many places I've worked, they have no guidance for developers of what they want. This is the #1 thing. If you just remember anything from this talk, please remember this. Okay, next. When you write the security standard, don't make it a link to NIST. Don't make it 300-page long Excel spreadsheet of stuff you copied from like the OWASP security testing guide or the application security verification standard or anything like that. Make it make sense to developers. Like, I want you to have all of the external apps to be HTTPS only. That's it. We don't care how you accomplish it. You want to force it on the server? That's cool. You want to add security headers? That's cool. I don't care. Or these are the security headers we want. If you aren't going to have these security headers, I want reasons. right? And I need you to sign off on the risk. Another thing that I've seen, I worked somewhere once, and I was like, we need a web app security standard, because this is my favorite thing. And she's like, we have one, and I'm like, great. I was on the dev team for 8 months. Why don't I know about it? She's like, well, you should. So we go to someone's desk, and I'm like, could you please show me a link to the web app security standard? They're like, we have what? No, we don't have that. Exactly. Oh, what? Okay. Oh, that, I think that's on. Maybe that's, it's red. No, that was off. Okay, well, I don't know what happened. Sorry, everyone. We walked around from desk to desk to desk to desk, and no one had heard of this standard. So then she's like, well, I'm going to send you a link. And then 4 days later, she's like, I can't find it. I'm like, so you don't have a web app standard. Like, you paid for one, but you don't have one. And I eventually found it, and a consultant had copied and pasted the OWASP top 10 and the SANS 20 or SANS 25 into a document. Like, literally, like, copied the web page. It was awesome. I'm like, oh man, I have the wrong job. But anyway, so you want to make them be able to find it. That's enough on this slide of old dudes laughing that used to be the president of America. Okay, so what if we gave developers security tools and then taught them how to use them, and then they did some of our work for us? I like giving tools to people so that they can do their jobs. And I really, really like it giving them tools so they can do my job. Because there's always way more of them than there are of me. I worked somewhere once and I gave everyone Zap. So that is the big blue circle with the white lightning through it. It's free, it's from OWASP, and it's a scanner. And it's not going to find everything that's wrong with your app, but it is going to find the easiest to find stuff. And I told all the developers, I want you to fix all those things before it comes to me, because I'm going to be worse. And if I find things that that could have found, I am going to come to your desk and make fun of you. And doing this is, once you teach them how to use it safely to make sure that there's no messes, it's such a good deal, and a lot of these are free. Like, I know that we couldn't afford licenses to some of the really expensive tools for like your entire development team, but you can certainly give them the open source free ones, right? And then have the security team come up with like more advanced tools perhaps. And I also want to note that just because something's free does not mean it's not awesome. There are some really amazing open source tools that will always be in my toolkit. Okay, so who's paying? As someone who was a consultant, someone who's been an employee, and someone who very briefly was a CISO, being a manager sucks. You know, consultants cost money, tools cost money, licenses, staff, all that costs money, but when you add all of it up, all of it's cheaper than a breach, no matter what. It's all cheaper. If you took 30% of your security budget starting and then added 30% and started doing AppSec, and then you don't have a breach in the next 5 years, you've definitely still saved money. I know that sounds crazy, but look at how expensive a breach is. I think they're $2 million on average, and that's including the baby breaches where like nothing really important happened. That's crazy. Like, companies go under because of this all the time. So if your boss is like hesitant to sign, just remind them that it costs less than a breach. It really helps. Take advantage of free stuff. Just because it's free doesn't mean it's not good. You have a chapter of OWASP in the city. You could ask if your company can host them, and then invite all your developers to go. That's part of how I got hooked. Actually, I feel like my microphone's getting like louder and quieter. Sorry. This is part of how I got hooked as well. I joined OWASP, and I figured out if I volunteered, I could help them pick which talks they were going to have, and I could pick all the things I wanted to learn, which I thought was awesome. I strongly encourage you, if you're interested in AppSec, to join these guys, because mostly everything's free, but also because these are the experts. This is the only non-biased data that you can get out there that's on this topic. Okay, so the next thing is culture change, which can be hard, but also exciting, right? Because if you do all of these things, culture should already be changing, but you want to do things to make sure it stays that way. you want to stop blaming each other for stuff. If you are going to have, so every time you have an incident or something bad happens, you should have a post-mortem. I'm sure that you all do that, where you get together after the dust has settled and talk about how this happened. And it should never be that it was Alice's fault or Bob's fault. It should be what safeguard was missing that allowed this person to do that. What process was broken? Did we not teach them this? Like, was this not clearly labeled so they didn't know that they shouldn't have done this with it, right? When we stop blaming people, we develop this thing called trust. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? I used to work somewhere and I managed, unfortunately, a lot of incidents. Like, the way it's still on. I managed a whole ton of incidents, and we did this. So one of the first incidents, the security team and I, totally guilty, we did a bunch of blaming. And then I had to talk with the guy after, and he was just like, this is so unfair. My team was never made aware of these things. And I realized that we had made an entire incident response process and then not showed it to the help desk team. And so then they didn't know what they were supposed to do. And then here I am getting upset with them when it's my fault. So after like a lot of apologies, I figured out that when you do a postmortem instead, you should just like talk about what happened. And so then after that, people started being more and more honest and more open, and people started telling me about things before they became an incident. And that was beautiful. And so, no blaming in our new culture. We also want to let people save face, right? We never, like whenever possible, let people save face. Don't rub people's noses in a mistake, like, oh, this thing happened, and then just move on. I've seen a lot of cases where it's like, oh, Bob and Alice did this again. It's like, no, it's not a good way to get that person to want to ever come to work here. Another thing we can do is we can co-locate the security team and the developers on the same floor, or in the same building, or have social events together, which might sound like a little kindergarten-y, but it's really hard to be a jerk to someone's face if you ate lunch with them before that day, or if you're waiting for the kettle for tea, if you drink tea, and then you're waiting with someone else, you get to know them, you chat, and you've been meeting with them later, it's a lot more difficult to be rude. But I know a lot of us in modern days, we work remotely, but if you can co-locate, it's much, much better. I've seen it where the security team is all left to their lonesome because they're doing highly sensitive things and blah, blah, blah. But it can really alienate the developers. And I've heard it's a lot easier to be a jerk in email than when they're this close. Okay, so this is a message for the conference organizers. I really liked the keynote this morning because it was not negative. It was good. Please don't book keynotes about how screwed we are. So many IT security conferences I go to, and the keynote is just like, everything's the worst. Let me tell you about those problems. Never gonna do it. Just get worse. That's discouraging. I feel like people should be up here because they have ideas of how things can get better and how we can fix things. And we still need to talk about problems. We can't pretend they're not there. But a keynote, I feel, should be like, let's go into battle together. Because that's what we're doing, right? Irina was saying during her talk that she was in the military. And in your military and most militaries, there's like people doing cyber, because that is where we are fighting wars now. And we all are working in that field, whether you realize it or not, right? Like, we're defending our intellectual property. We're defending, like, our company's money. We're defending our own money, right? We're defending our critical infrastructure. We're defending our democracy. And so I don't think we should be discouraging anyone that works in IT security because we have enough discouragement from bad hackers. Okay, so this next one, I think we should lead by example. So all of you are going to go back to work probably on Monday, and then you can forget some of the things that you've learned here, right? Or you can think about them and then not do them. Or instead, if you wanted to, you could think of some of these ideas and see if any of them might help where you work, right? Like, Maybe there's some processes that could be improved and you could talk to your boss about them. Or if you're a supervisor, you could set an example with your team, right? By not accepting unprofessional behavior at work. You could set an example by holding yourself to a higher technical standard, right? There's a lot of things like that I've mentioned all through this talk, but that everyone has mentioned up until this talk, and that people will continue to mention until I think we finish at 7:30 tonight or 8, right? So I encourage you to hopefully, whether you're taking physical notes or mental notes or electronic notes, to remember these things and actually apply them. And when you do, you were saying an example, everyone else in your office will see, and hopefully over time we can start changing our cultures for the better. And with that, I'm going to review the plan and then say one more thing. Okay, so the plan. Are you ready? Yes. Okay, so we are going to enable our security and developer teams by giving them processes and training and resources that they need to get their jobs done. And then we're going to initiate and maintain a culture change through positive example. And with that, I'm going to be awkward now with all of you because this is my specialty. Our jobs are to enable, so who here works in security? Yeah. Okay, so who here doesn't work in security? Okay, high fives for coming to a security conference. Yes! It is our jobs to enable everyone else in our business or organization to get whatever they're trying to do done securely. That's our whole job. If we're in their way, we're doing it wrong. Right? And I would like you to take it upon yourself to remember that when you're making security decisions in the future. Like, the biggest complaint that I hear from everyone ever about working with security is the answer is no. Instead of, you know what, if we do that, it's pretty high risk. Could we brainstorm a better way that maybe, like, we could do this where it's more secure, but you still get done what you need to get done? So I am appealing to you that you consider some of these ideas and you try to remember it's our job to enable everyone to do things securely. It is not ever our job to stop what's happening in general with business or organizations or government or whatever it is we're doing. Our job is to enable. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention today. I have a blog, and I'm on Twitter, and these slides are up there, but with slightly different pictures. So if you had a camera and wanted to take a picture, you might want to take a picture of this. And also, I'm allowed to give away some things for free sometimes. And if you ever wanted to try doing security in the cloud, if you want to try Azure for free, you can. No pressure. But free is so nice. And with that, I have like a whole bunch of stickers at the back of that cute raccoon that has made a debut in many of my slides. And I also have candies. These are made of maple syrup. Okay, so I'm from Canada, this is our thing. Who here has heard of maple syrup? Yeah, that's right. These are made only of tree sap. There's no sugar added. Our trees bleed deliciousness. And so you take like a whole bucket and melt it down to get one candy. So if you ask a question, you get a candy. Pretty good bribery, right? Pretty good bribery. So does anyone have a question? And the question can't be, can I have a candy? I'm so on to that. Oh, is it on? I got a candy now, so I'm waiting for you to ask a question. Because I was going to ask, can I have a candy? But I'll just ask a question anyway. What's up with the raccoon? Oh, so my team at Microsoft, we have an artist on our team, and she started drawing this little raccoon for us doing like cool things. And so she drew him being a cute little hacker, and then she drew him, there's one of him, I define it as patching all the servers and upgrading all the frameworks. And then she has another one of him where he's in this room and it's on fire, and he's like, this is fine, because when I manage an incident, that's how I feel. And so that's our little raccoon. His name is Bit. Yeah, and my friend Ashley makes them, and like, just every week she's like, here, and it's adorableness all over the place. Does anyone else have any questions? Here, and then there, and there.
What kind of positive reinforcement models do you use to keep the culture change sticking and going, moving forwards always, and slightly to the left?
Okay, so for people that didn't hear, it's like, what types of things do you do to try to keep the culture change sticking? So, Candy, I give a lot of developers high fives. Like, I've actually made pins. So I had a dev team once, and it was so much trouble trying to get them to pass the tests. And finally, like, it took forever, because it was rocky. And I made them pins with a gold star on it that said, it works on my machine. You really liked it. Also, I try to, if you have a big release, have like a potluck, celebrate all your wins, right? If they pass a security test the first time, like I literally give high fives. When I was a consultant, at one point I gave a whole bunch of them high fives, and I was considering making like a little, like we give like little kids like a thing like, you won, with like stickers and stuff. They're like, literally, we're shocked you didn't. And those things are cheesy, but people really like it, like celebrating wins. Also, I'm a huge fan of talking, clearly, but I didn't used to speak, I used to be the host. So when I was a developer, I had this lunch and learn program for like a million years, and just at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, I would have someone come in and just teach us new stuff I wanted my team to know. And then I joined OWASP, and then I was the host there for a few years, and then eventually there was a lot of arm twisting, and then eventually I had to speak or else. My professional mentor announced on the internet, she's speaking at B-Sides next year. I was like, whoa. He's like, you have a year, come on. And then this happened. So I find like engaging developers like that really works, and it really helps set like a more positive environment. Like it makes the lunch and learn thing, teaching things, extracurricular things. Like even like I worked somewhere and we made a security placemat, and when we would have all staffs, we would put crayons, like coloring crayons, like pencil crayons out, and these security placemats, and it would like teach you things about security. Like there would be like a crossword puzzle and the answers about security things, and it sounds super cheesy, but like people used them, like they were all taken home. So like it's working, right? Like it sounds really cheesy, but ooh, I feel like there's a really important question at the back. Did I? Because he's had his hand up the whole time. It's good. I'm glad the candies are working.
I wanted to ask you a very simple question. If you had to recommend one single tool for web developers to learn, only one, which one would you go for?
I would say OWASP Zap, because it's free, because it's got all these things turned off when you download it, so it's so much simpler to use. Like my favorite tool that I use is Burp Suite, if I'm gonna hack things specifically, but it's so hard to drive. It took me like a day to figure out how to turn it on. But with Zap, literally, like I have a little workshop I do, and in like 20, 30 minutes, everyone's hacking stuff. It's so much easier, and that's always the one I say people should start with. Also because it's free, so you don't feel bad you spent money on it if you don't end up getting into it. Thank you. There were more questions. There's one here, and there's one over there.
Okay, so thank you for a great talk. I had also a question regarding the breach cost that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Do you have any good examples on the companies that went out of business due to this cost?
I don't remember any right now, but if you read the Verizon breach report and you see amounts that some companies have lost, like for instance, Ashley Madison, are they still in business? Has anyone heard of them? I don't see those crappy advertisements in my spam mail, and I guess I don't get spam really. But like, I don't think that their business is doing so well if it still exists. I think someone told me it doesn't exist. I don't know if you know, but I'm from the city where like everyone, all of the members of Ashley Madison live apparently. Like we have like this really high, crazy disproportionate level of members compared to any other city, which is so embarrassing. But like that breach actually resulted in deaths. right? But I don't have specific examples, but if you read the Verizon Breach Report, like, it should be in there. And there's a question over there too. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
I feel that there's a lot less of security people around the businesses. So how do you're going about tackle the lack of safeties? How do we get more people in this?
So me doing this is one of the ways we get more people doing AppSec. Also, okay, so he was saying, how do we get more people in the field of application security? So I tend to try to convince developers to join us. My OWASP chapter, we have over 800 people now, and I started a mentoring program so we could pair people. So I mentor several people. And I think if you're a senior person, it's kind of your job to mentor junior people. Like, there's tons of people that invested in you early in your career, whether you realize it or not. And giving back, I feel super, super important for senior people. So I feel like I'm kind of doing that right now. I think the best way to find AppSec people is to make them yourself. That's what I've been doing. It works. It's an expensive proposition, but it's a good way to get people. And that's the only way I know how. Also, I feel like, what if universities taught this or something? I've had all these people ask, like, why don't you teach at universities? And so the university in my school, because I don't have a PhD, so therefore I'm not like a real person in academia, I'm not a human being. I went to college, oh my gosh, I don't even have a degree. And so they're like, you can be an adjunct professor. So I believe they said it would be 4,000 Canadian dollars per year, which is like 3,000 American dollars, no, per semester. I had to make all the course content myself. They, whoa, they then own it. And then I have to give up 2 evenings per week for 4 months and all my weekends marking. But I'm like, did you know I can teach for SANS for 10,000 American per week? And then if I rate content, I get royalties from then on when anyone else teaches it. And they're like, well, you don't have a PhD or anything. I just, like, this is why academia is teaching things that are just like 1,000 years old. Which I know is like really, really biased and I probably shouldn't say it, but I don't care, it's true. No, but they, like, if you pay, so like my diploma in college, I worked 2 jobs and I went my way through and I graduated with almost no, but people like spend like 100,000, 200,000 going to universities. Like in North America, it's very expensive, especially in America. And then to have them not teach you security and they're like, oh, well, you know, we don't have to cover or something. Imagine, sorry, like rant almost over, I swear. But imagine if electricians went to school and then they taught them when they switch a light switch, will you just twist the 2 wires? Yeah, then just shove that back in the wall and hope the house doesn't burn down. They'll probably be fine. Instead of telling them, like, you wrap it with electrical tape and then you put the little thread on, you twist it, so that in case something happens to the tape, you have a second thing, and then you shove it in the wall, and then nothing burns down. Could you imagine if they're like, oh, that's electricians' problems? Right? Like, that's ridiculous! I think students should just, like, flip out how much they're being paid, or how much they're paying. Anyway. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be around the rest of the day and the evening. And clearly I like talking a lot, so please come talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Dr. Skyler. All right, so I know you guys are probably getting a little bit tired, but have no fear because it's time to drink coffee and eat some, yeah, and take stickers from the back as well. And drink some coffee, eat some buns and stuff, I think. There's going to be stuff behind this door, I believe. I'm going to open it now and check, hopefully.
Han går ju med på det och skakar hand. Det är lite grann så. Det har gått ett år. Ja, jag vet det. Jag vet det. Så det är det jag menar. Jag förväntar mig inte mer i längre, men jag är övertygad om att det är en sån sak. Det är bättre om du säger nej. Ja. Jag tror inte att säga att jag kan bygga kvar och som kör in det. Då är det bättre att säga nej. Kör du då? Kör det här var det viktigaste hon sa.
Okay, let's get started. Help me in welcoming Aaron.
I'm not sure you guys can hear me. Seems like we're all good. So make sure. Okay, thanks guys for attending my talk. I guess only one track, but it's my second year here. Love being here. Love the crew, the organizers. Thanks for having me, for sure. The title of my talk is called Finessing Fake Firmware Security for Friday Fun, and I'm not even joking. I spent all morning bug hunting on a handful of firmware and found some bugs reportable. Some things are going to be in detail, some things are not. We're going to have a good balance of offensive, defense, pointing out some snake oil products and things that are going on within the embedded and IoT space. So, yep, my name's Aaron Guzman, also known as Aaron. From Los Angeles, recently published a book up here back in November of 2017. I don't want to miss this next point. And if you were at my talk last year, I love pizza, and every single place that someone recommended last year to go check out for pizza, I went and checked out. I'm disappointed that I haven't gone anywhere yet to eat pizza, but I will tomorrow. So I am a chapter leader for OWASP Los Angeles. I am a co-organizer for AppSec California. So if anybody would like to come to LA, I mean, it's hotter here than it is in LA right now, but in last week of January, feel free to ping me. I'm involved in a lot of OWASP and Cloud Security Alliance activities. I am a project leader for the Embedded Application Security Project, also a contributor for the IoT project, and we're going to have some new documentation coming out for both the IoT and the Embedded AppSec. Currently, I'm with Gotham Digital Science, who's owned by Aon, so I head the automotive and IoT practice for testing. And I spoke at a couple conferences as well. Love to teach, definitely ask questions. Afterwards I'll be around till Sunday, basically, so I'm gonna have a good time. I love being here. So let's get started talking about the kind of current state of firmware security. I'm just gonna point out 3 different industry verticals. We'll talk about medical. Medical's getting better overall. Definitely has a lot of regulatory and lobbyists behind medical firmware and medical security, medical device security, and even hospitals as well, hospital medical device deployment security. But it's still pretty bad. It's a work in progress, right? Connecting medical devices to the internet, to the network, or to a network is something that's new. In automotive, it's definitely still, learning the security kind of culture. A lot of different changes going on from, a piece of, or a product, meaning the car, not facing the internet, and now it's exposed in many different interfaces. The kind of embracement of security culture is occurring now either between bug bounties, between security research, and if you pay attention to the news, there's a lot going on within automotive, whether that be the head units themselves, telematic units, OBD2 aftermarket products, there's a lot going on. But again, before it was mostly based upon obscurity, I guess you can say, access to the physical system of a vehicle and the security of that, gaining access to pull firmware, to sniff buses, and so forth. So automotive is definitely an interesting space, and again, it's a place that I kind of live in testing-wise, whether from the suppliers and OEM side as well. But let's move on to talk a little bit towards the consumer aspect. Total mess. I had in my last slide, Falcon and Linksys. I used to lead security over at Linksys for a short period of time, and I know the growing pains of trying to push a culture of security with no incentive to do so. No developers have any type of secure coding experience, never had their applications facing the web. They were basically thought that if it was over Wi-Fi, it's over the local network, it's secure, all good to go. Whether it's C, whether it's Lua, C++, PHP, ASP, all the kind of embedded languages that are used, they've never had any type of web-facing products. And again, with low margins and not a lot of incentives, it's definitely there's definitely reasons why the consumer space still has terrible security within IoT, within embedded. And one of the ideas or reasons that I put up here is lack of regulatory compliance. There's no requirements to have security. Security doesn't sell. Security features don't sell. People get compromised every day, which is fine. I mean, as long as the patching, updating cycle follows that shortly after, which is getting better for the major manufacturers. And it's also created a new separate market where we have these devices now being deployed inline to your network or inside your home network to monitor your devices, to monitor potential threats within your home network. So it's created this kind of side industry vertical that we're going to talk about in a bit, but basically promises you the world, right? We're going to prevent O-days from infecting your IoT devices, from your endpoints, your Mac OS, your Windows boxes. But there's really no proof, and we'll get to debunking some of those claims. Because in the end, security is hard. Multiple, it's everybody's responsibility. There's different aspects, especially when you're talking about embedded and IoT, as far as the different interfaces, different entry points. Everybody kind of tries to go the complex way, right? They want to, put these nice, new, shiny, JavaScript frameworks to handle all the client-side protections, but the basics of, access control and maybe user account management, things like that, are not being thought of. So I was talking about some of the big problems here, or within, I guess, the consumer space and even, the new arising industry verticals with these IoT kind of security hubs that promise, you the world, again, like I said, with protecting you from things that, they have never even seen. So generally, as a security professional, I see it as snake oil, and, some of the big companies out there that are selling these products, some are doing their due diligence and at least performing the basics of what you should be performing as from the hardware aspect, from the firmware aspect, and even mobile app. But they also include, with these products, they're kind of threat intel feeds, right? But they're basically using your home network as their threat intel to siphon and categorize all your data and send it off to their big data platform, whatever it is, and use it as samples. And they all have their own, right? As far as threat intel feeds, some of them you subscribe to, some of them are built in. But again, it's more and more data points. Everyone's heard about the Alexa, voice recording, send it off to your, your contacts. But in this case, when we're talking about these products, there's, a lack of, let's say, transparency with regards to, what it's built with. What's the kind of bill of materials of the device? What's the software, framework that it's running on? What's the, platform? Is it a real-time operating system? Is it Linux? How long is it going to be updated? When's the end of life? There's nothing like that, to kind of gauge the cleanliness or, the livelihood or lifehood of the product itself. But again, like I said, there's some things where the marketing team takes it and runs with it, and in this case, it's these products that again are selling you with promises to protect you from whatever it may be, but they're not telling you why, and they're basically using kind of an obscurity type of explanation with that. But we're going to go through and kind of take apart devices and go through I guess our own research, if you will. But coming to one of the last points here, there's no certifications or attestation, right? Like how secure or how can it be guaranteed, or what level of security can it be, I guess, aware of? And I think they're working on that right now for medical, for sure. Kind of like a nutritional facts in a way. And they're requiring this for medical in the States with the FDA to have a bill of materials, software bill of materials. So all the libraries, all the frameworks that are being used, all the versions of them. And so that's a good leeway into every other industry vertical. I think even in China they're requiring software bill of materials, which is surprising, but still something that they're doing. And another problem for security and embedded in IoT is the margins. You have a device that probably costs a couple dollars, and you have to support it for 10, 15 years in the whole cloud infrastructure. There's not a lot of incentive to put a TPM or a secure element chip inside of a device for secure boot or for any type of security to store any credentials, any access keys, API keys. So you usually find a lot of exposed secrets in firmware hard-coded. Unfortunately, hopefully we learn from that. And usually if it doesn't have any type of hardware security chip or anything like that, it's probably not secure, meaning it's not verifying firmware images, it's not validating the integrity of the data or the firmware itself. It's not, let's say, the communication, the transport security is probably not doing well either, because maybe the private key is held within the client. So anything that's private, let's say a certificate that's been signed by a CA and it's hard-coded to a piece of firmware, you're going to have to reissue that certificate. Otherwise, someone can masquerade as your domain and serve up malicious content, which has happened for a big device manufacturer. And again, some of these devices as well, they're never updated. Some of them may never be even connected to the internet in some time. And let's even think about automotive, where you can't force people to update their vehicles, update their head units, update their GPS, although the mobility and connectivity of automotive moving forward is getting larger, right? Everything's getting connected, and now requirements for suppliers and things like that is to provide updates for a certain number of years via some sort of OTA function, which again opens up another attack avenue, potentially. So problems, that's all fine. We can deal with problems, just a matter of progress. But who's taking advantage of these problems and the lack of security in devices are the botnet kind of developers and creators, malicious users, nation states who are taking advantage of these vulnerable small home office devices, these consumer devices that have or use the same kind of basic code base just to kind of go through, let's say, one of the main important ones here is Mirai. I'm sure most people here have heard of Mirai, correct? And Mirai, the biggest thing about Mirai was not just the DDoS, it was, is actually the release of the source code, of Mirai source code. So now, you have super influx and all these IoT botnets being created and just targeting certain devices that, the botnet creators are choosing. And, we have different examples here. Hajame and BreakerBot are more like vigilante botnets that are either Hajame is stopping killing all the services that are running, that are vulnerable. BreakerBot totally zeroes out a partition of the device and bricks it. So you have to manually reset that device to defaults, which is kind of funny, it also kind of sucks. And you also have the other ones that are taking advantage of remote code execution vulnerabilities or command injection vulnerabilities. I won't speak towards all of these, but as far as like the embedded threat landscape, everyone's probably heard of Blueborn, right? And Crack, WPA2, these kind of proven protocols that have been fuzzed, tested, thought to be secure, are now evolving when we have even CPU architecture vulnerabilities that are affecting the underlying platform of the device itself. So ARM, for example, was affected by Spectre. Different ARM families, so the Cortex-M, the Cortex-A, which is like iPhones, M is microcontrollers, so vehicles, and R is for real-time systems, so it could be a number of things. It could be medical, it could be also vehicles, it could be industrial control systems. But as far as the development of these botnets, and like I said, using Mirai as a template moving forward, they're now evolving to not only change the targets, but also change the architecture itself. So ARC is a CPU architecture that was the first botnet that's been created targeting that certain architecture. Then we have some other ICS frameworks, but they're not using Mirai per se. But a lot's happening, a lot's been going on, as opposed to pre-2017, where it was mostly just CSRF botnets that are taking advantage and changing DNS configurations or admin page configurations and things like that. Now they're actually getting shell access to the device and spreading throughout the local network and infecting other devices as well. And speaking to each other, blocking out other botnets from attack. And the kind of steps to develop a botnet payload is not too complex. This is something that I kind of gave a training yesterday. We went through some of this here, but we basically extract the firmware file system, however the folder structure is. Figure out what the architecture is of your target device, whatever it may be. It could be ARM, it could be MIPS, which are probably the most common. So once you figure out the architecture and the endiness, is just the way the computer and the hardware understand bytes and bits and things like that. That's how you'll structure your payloads according to your architecture, according to your device. So your payload should have some communication towards either your C2 environment, your command and control, or your other devices that are going to be attacked for P2P, peer-to-peer communication. So once you create that, go ahead and build that with your cross-compiler. You can use an embedded build system, such as Buildroot, it's common. Yocto is another one. Again, these are free as well. Build up your payload that has your communication configured and whatever kind of exploits you have within your payload. Obviously, you want to test it via emulation via the device itself. And then build it into your Mirai template code according to whatever ports that your target device is listening on, whatever banner you're looking for. Again, with Mirai's target template for botnets, super easy. It's out on the web, and it's little to no effort almost. Like I said, simple-ish 7 steps, but it's something that can easily be done, especially someone with no experience and who wants to create malicious software or test certain situations, or it could be used for red teaming actually, to pivot throughout a network, move laterally, whatever it may be. And basically, developers, for these botnets are, thinking that the whole internet's going to be doomed because, again, it's so easy. Everything is being infected. I think there's over like 300, 400,000 devices that are infected between different botnets, whether that's Perserai, whether that's Hajami. Anybody ever play Altered Beast before? Old school? Some hands? Okay. You don't know Altered Beast, it's a great game. But what they're doing as far as a developer for these botnets is they're targeting whatever has the highest impact, and that's something that you would do as a pen tester. You're assessing a device or you're assessing a network. You want to target whatever has the biggest payout. And in this case, you can target the supply chain of how the device is created, and the middleman who creates the base stack level code, like the file system, the operating system. In this case, that would be the original design manufacturer, the ODM, otherwise known as supplier or a white labeling development firm who builds code and then sells it off to a number of different OEMs. And this is common for almost every industry vertical. Basically, whoever can develop a piece of software faster than in-house, or maybe it's cheaper, or maybe you're outsourcing to India, China, Taiwan, whatever it may be. That supplier has their code base, their services running, their configurations, their debug, backdoor code, within a number of different types of devices that are sold to these OEMs. So in this case, we have Zhang Mai here, who was responsible for Mirai, who shipped their code and sold it to a number of different NVR, IP cameras, doorbells, routers, whatever you can think of, you name it. Zhang Mai sold it to him. That's kind of the base of Mirai. What we've yet to see is the suppliers in different industry verticals, either whether that's medical or even automotive in this case, where you have a major supplier for head units, telematic systems, or the platforms for telematic systems, QNX, for example, and that propagate out to a number of different types of vehicles. But it's common. You'll see a ton of different OEM manufacturers using QNX with different configurations, but if there's a piece of dead code that has hard-coded credentials, that has a backdoor, whatever it may be, that's left over from the ODM, and the OEM doesn't have the code to review that black box binary, it's going to be shipped, and that's the way it's going to be. And again, flashing some of these products and devices, it may never happen, and you can never force it, and there's so many different variables, in the event you want to force an update, let's say for an OTA use case to update a car. You lose connectivity, it's expensive for the OEMs, a lot of different use cases. So again, very, very easy to figure out who the supplier is. That could be through reconnaissance and then targeting that specific supplier, looking for those vulnerable devices to attack and compromise and essentially create a botnet. And some basic kind of firmware exploitation methods is, again, we talked about recon, figuring out who that supplier is, what their products are, and then obviously you have to get a piece of firmware to review, to analyze, to, again, target your architecture, that endiness we talked about, build your payload, try to find some vulnerabilities within the software stack, and execute. Execute it with emulating the firmware, performing dynamic analysis, runtime analysis, and so forth. So that's generally, what a kind of malware developer for IoT botnets, or even pen testers, whatever it may be, if you want to perform some research on your free time, such as, this morning, 7 a.m. to 1:30, something that I did, to gather, any number of information from the web on, let's say you can't find the firmware, via forums, via support. What could be a good use of recon is subdomains, subdomain takeover issues. You'll see archive sites that have legacy firmware. You'll even see, I've been lucky and pulled firmware for a certain number of vehicles via archive sites that were once, password protected and are not anymore. So things to keep in mind, kind of different methods you can use. Usually, if, let's say that the software methods don't work, where you can't get access to the firmware, or you can't get a root shell or anything like that, you're probably going to try to go with the hardware method and try to pull the firmware either through hardware, whether that be UART, JTAG, SPI, or just sniff the buses and test points that are left in every piece of hardware, because there has to be test points for manufacturing. There's no question about it. It's just a matter of security controls from the manufacturing side, what they're placing as far as either username or password, or is it some sort of security feature or anti-tampering technique for hardware-wise, and are there any controls for firmware? Again, I talked about secure boot, integrity, things like that during startup. Verifying whether the piece of firmware is legitimate and from the manufacturer themselves. And some tools I think these are probably the main tools to get started, at least, into analyzing pieces of firmware. Definitely binwalk, right? People have heard of binwalk before. It's installed on Kali Linux. It's still being actively worked on. If you take a look at GitHub, it had latest commit probably within the week. There's other newer tools, and most of them are Python based, right? Binwalk's Python. Firmware analysis toolkit's Python. That helps with the automation of emulating our firmware, so we can test and not have hardware. That way we don't have to buy something. It's kind of a gray area, right? But that's how we can try the product and test out the product before we actually buy the hardware, put it on my desk, because I don't want an extra device I already have racks, literally racks in my office, in my house, with enough products. So if I can emulate it, by all means, I will. You can use, again, firmware analysis toolkit for that. And that's actually a wrapper for Firmidine, which is another wrapper for Keymoves. It's basically a virtual machine type of, it's a platform for virtual machines and emulating binaries for certain platforms, MIPS, ARM, whatever it may be. Then as far as, when you want to analyze the file system contents, let's say you extract the file system, you see that it has, the bin, dev, etc, user sbin, things like that. You can point firmwalker to automate some of the analysis for you, or at least parse it for you for hard-coded passwords, private keys. It's basically a bash script that Craig Smith wrote. He's the guy who responsible for the Car Hacker's Handbook. So it's a good tool. It's a free tool. It's definitely modular as well. And again, some of these tools, except binwalk, were not around like 3 years ago. There's even more tools. I'm just giving you a few here. But last but not least, the firmware analysis comparison toolkit is another Python-based tool, but basically you can drag and drop your .img, .bin, .tx, whatever your firmware is, and it'll do automated analysis for you. So thankfully, the university over in Germany has been working on this specific tool for drones and military and for their own purposes. But again, another free tool. But just keep in mind the amount of resources it needs. I don't know if anybody has an extra 16-core, 64-gig rig laying around, but what I usually do is drag and drop my firmware and go to sleep, wake up, see what's going on, see and then do it the next day again. Otherwise, it'll consume obviously all your RAM. But it's similar to the mobile security space. With mobile security, they have a lot of free Python tools as well. A lot of different support for Android and iOS. iOS not so much, but they have a similar tool called Mobile Security Framework. Literally drag and drop the Android app, for example, into a web application. So our tools are evolving. They're free. We have more enabled to do research, more enabled to validate and verify and check what these manufacturers are claiming. And it's fun. It's fun to find issues. Also fun to fix issues. That's usually the point, is to discover these flaws, but also help them fix them. Hopefully they're open to it. Usually they are, and I think now the culture's shifting in the industry as a whole. Probably can't see that, but this is the web UI for firmware analysis comparison toolkit. But it categorizes even usernames and passwords. It has bin lock in there by default and extracts your file system for you in an automated way. I would definitely check it out if you want to get into some, firmware analysis. Like I said, you don't have to know anything, to use the tool. But it does have coverage issues, obviously. It's not going to look for, specific things related to the industry vertical. It's only looking for, certain strings, certain expressions, things like that. So menu analysis is definitely, a must. But with free tools, it's easier to help, again, promote research and to learn. And expose people who should be, sharing what licensing is used for. If you're using GPL, you're supposed to publish your source code, right? And this is a kind of a controversial topic, right? Not everybody even does this, right? Not everyone publishes their source code if they're using GPL. I know over at Linksys, we basically didn't publish on our support side. We had it on someone's random GitHub for the WRTs as an example. But basically, this device is a semantic Norton core home router is what it is. So it's supposed to secure your local network, and it's using a version of OpenWRT. And again, they're called out for not releasing their source code and not abiding by certain licensing. But again, controversial. But it's cool, right? Because we're all hackers and we can figure it out. So here's the router that I was just mentioning. It has an intrusion prevention system. It has deep packet inspection. So it's basically looking at all your traffic. It's one of those it is semantic. So it's they have LifeLock already. So they already want your whole life basically in your house. So they're going to look through all your traffic. They already have your social for the people who do have LifeLock. I don't know if you guys know that's basically one of those identity protection services. But the idea is, again, to secure your entire kind of, personal identity and your traffic and your devices, your IoT devices and personal devices from attacks and from, they say backdoors, but I don't know how you can prevent them from the backdoor. It's hard-coded into a piece of firmware. So unless they're doing research, which I doubt. So there's this company called Betty who did some good research on this product specifically, and I spent some time earlier looking through it, pulling down the firmware, sifting through, seeing what I can find. But as far as the research is concerned, they've actually done their due diligence and invested in a kind of secure hardware platform, or with a chip that has a secure element, and they have secure boot enabled through Qualcomm. And they also have integrity checks, and they verify their certificate chains, which, again, you should be, right, if you're promising the world. But at the end of the day, they didn't do some basic things like, encrypt their firmware as one instance. So you can literally download the latest firmware just with this curl request. All it's looking for is if it's coming from this host, which is pretty funny. But it ended up being, there's a remote code execution, command injection via Bluetooth to get access to the firmware and then pull the firmware from there. But at the end of the day, they've done some of their due diligence, and you have other products out there. So we just talked about the Norton core router. There's other routers like ThinkBox. Again, they either go in line with your router or they listen passively. And ThinkBox is based on Ubuntu Core, and it has their own similar kind of thread intel, right? So Symantec has their own thread intel, which is their feeds. ThinkBox has their own, which is Digital Fence. Probably not as common. They have a Thing iOS app that you can usually kind of inventory or enumerate all the devices on their network. I guess the kind of cool thing, and this release, all these devices that I'm going to talk about released last year, or within the last year. So this one released in late August of last year. But the cool thing is that it scans your external IP space and closes up ports and sends you reports on what's open and what's closed. So when you think about UPnP and the vulnerabilities of piercing your firewall access controllers, or your NAT basically, It can help you with, from that aspect. But it's not something that's been popped open yet. I was trying to get the firmware earlier, didn't have no luck, but I'm going to keep trying. I'll probably just buy the device and pop it open. But the next one is Bitdefender box. Anybody heard of this one before? Similar thing, plugs into your network. Embedded did some additional research here. First with Bitdefender, but it uses web filtering for malicious sites, kind of, with like DNS as an example, and there's any type of phishing or anything like that, potential malicious sites, it'll redirect you to kind of a splash page. But again, this is one of those ones that claims to identify backdoors, claims to identify vulnerabilities in software, and different versions of vulnerabilities in software, which was debunked and proven not to. Basically what Embedded did was put a vulnerable camera that had command injections, that had published CVEs on the network for over a week. No alerts, nothing happened. And along the same lines, this device is supposed to do a vulnerability assessment. So it's supposed to actively probe and perform a number of different tests. It doesn't say how, it doesn't say what type of methods, or if they're using a third party, whatever it may be. But basically they weren't doing anything. What Embedded did was, again, put that camera, put another vulnerable D-Link device, and then exploited a non-reported bug, a 0-day, within D-Link, a D-Link product, and Box did nothing. So again, one of those things where, if you're buying these products to, secure, be more aware, identify potential threats, and again, promising you the world is definitely not, the route to go if you're not even, doing your own due diligence as a manufacturer. Basically, the marketing team running with it. The funny thing, though, is they had a backdoor, and the backdoor was a hard-coded SSH access for their support team once you reboot the device, which again is terrible. You should never do that. Never do that. That was Embedded, right? Checking if they're walking it like they're talking it, and they definitely aren't. Totally debunked. Product is not what it claims to be. They have a version 2, but I hear it's all of the same. Development, production builds, a lot of commented code. Here's some other common ones here. You have Netgear's Armor, which is powered by Bitdefender, the same people from Box who weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. But no, I guess they're working together, partnering, and again, it's supposed to do that vulnerability assessment we're talking about here. Promising you to scan all your devices, unauthorized access. It's interesting to me, again, these claims that, again, they haven't proven, and then the DNS safe browsing with malicious sites. I still love the 0-day exploits, because obviously you can protect from 0-day exploits. So again, I poked around this. I spent some time yesterday, right before the training class that I instructed, and right away found a private key, server key. I ended up finding multiple private keys, and I found multiple certificates, hard-coded certificates, user backdoor accounts, be warned that this specific device doesn't even have the Netgear Armor yet. I was looking at it, and it's not even released. So if this device, they can't even secure their own device, it might not be great, to secure your whole network. But yeah, I found some hard-coded web service credentials, and they use this really outdated Apache access server, not even access 2. So this is like 2011 or 2010, something like that. But yeah, I didn't try to access the admin interface or anything like that. Just saw that they had it there. Make sure it was up, basically. But yeah, a lot of bad things. Again, hard coding secrets on the client side, meaning whether that's the firmware, whether that's a mobile app, whether that's anything that the client, you as a user has control over, unless it's protected by a hardware chip, a secure element, it's never a good idea. We have ASUS AI protection. This was quite funny. This is another one. Again, I was hacking away earlier. They have this idea of Pro and Classic, where you have basically IPS enabled in line with your network traffic. And again, all of these devices are inline within your, they could be either inline within your traffic, so plugged in directly from your router, actually from your modem to your router, and you're connecting through Wi-Fi, whatever it may be, or just passively listening on the network. But again, another one that does web filtering or DNS filtering, and the Pro, it has IPS functionality, and the Classic does not, but it's based on Trend Micro. So we have Bitdefender, Trend Micro, partnering up. This is good though, right? I mean, at least there's some sort of trying to build it into a product, trying to build into consumer devices where, again, there's absolutely nothing, or was absolutely nothing, a few years ago. So at least there's, some sort of, security-ish features that are being built in, but again, there are more data points that they're pulling from you as consumers, your devices, what you're doing, what you're watching, again, selling that data to third parties, and not even protecting the communication between their devices to their cloud infrastructure. So yeah, they have anybody have one of these ASUS devices? No worries, no worries. They have, it's pretty cool. I mean, I guess they have their, router security assessment checks for vulnerabilities. But again, I was looking through a piece of firmware yesterday, this morning actually, through a number of devices that have this feature enabled for Pro. And again, identify a number of different hard-coded URLs with API keys. And I didn't put them up here because again, I didn't report them. But the funniest one I found was an EC2 instance for, it could be a developer. But aside from, we'll get back to the hard-coded URL or EC2 instance. But found a number of different private certificates that were within the firmware, as well as over 50 foreign IPs that were hard-coded into firmware. So it's talking to third parties that you may not even know about. But coming back to this this URL here, obviously my first reaction if I see something EC2 Amazon, I'm gonna plug it into the URL and see what I get. And I got someone's actual real network. They were actually connected. There was 5 client devices to this network. No username or password. So I thought I'd take a look at what AI protection had to offer, right? That's all I did though. Don't worry. And here's a little little screenshot. They have their router security assessment. Obviously, there's some danger here. But this is only one instance. I found multiple instances of the same occurrence, but different URLs for different firmware images. So it's scary. And again, for firmware, you can't delete firmware from someone's workstation or someone's device themselves. It's going to be there forever, basically. And people are learning from that. D-Link is now password protecting their legacy firmware images. Although they're not very strong, but I mean, there's one type of defense, if you will. But once I saw that hard-coded URLs and plugged them in, I was good. I was like, this is exactly what I need. To figure out some of the secrets, some of the issues, figure out what this product actually has to offer, which is not much, unfortunately. Not yet. It's maturing. It's within the first few years. Again, all of them really. They're all learning, unfortunately. We're all learning with them. So there's more. Again, I'm going to report some of the bugs that I found earlier today. But switching over to another type of consumer device, which is a vehicle, is the Audi and kind of Volkswagen research that happened about 2 months ago now, where they selectively went through and enumerated basically vehicles that had the most attack surface, whether that's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, USBs, different types of head units, and what they did was exploit a vulnerability within the Wi-Fi daemon, I guess, when you're connected locally, and got shell access to the platform to the head unit. In this case, is running a real-time operating system, QNX, and just so you know, QNX is QNX 7 and above. 7 and above has loads of security features. In this case, again, a vehicle that was just purchased, which is what they did. It wasn't fully updated, and it was exploited. And the research is fully out there about that. But the QNX or real-time operating systems are not bulletproof. If you happen to look into the differences between embedded Linux and real-time operating systems, the underlying technology or how they communicate is completely different, but you can still open up attack surfaces within real-time operating systems as you could with embedded Linux, such as using POSIX utilities like cat, grep, whatever it may be for command injection as an example, which is what happened here. So they had Telnet. Why would you have Telnet? I'm not hating it, but it is what it is. I'm not going to go through that. Probably testing. I don't know. Everything's for testing. And we'll go to the latest one here is the BMW research. Anybody heard of this one? Yeah? Multiple remote code executions. These guys did some crazy work. Not only went through the head unit of the vehicle, they also took apart the telematics device itself and reverse engineered both of the firmwares for the head unit as well as the telematics unit. So, and also had multiple remote code executions locally, plugging into USB, as well as through Bluetooth. I think there's another method, so they have, I think, 3 or 4 ways to get remote code execution to your vehicle. Just crazy. But again, another old device, old QNX version, 6.5. Good research, super detailed. They haven't released all the details as far as what they did, how they found it, and what the tools they used. They're giving obviously the manufacturer the chance to fix it. I think it's proposed to be fixed next year. It is what it is, but so more and more research, right? Previously, automotive research was almost shunned, or from the lawyer perspective, the book was thrown at them. We weren't enabled, we didn't have enough tools or expertise maybe. And even for QNX as an example, real-time operating systems, they are commercial license-based, so you have to be a developer with them or a partner with them, with the company, in order to use their tools, know the underlying technology, the development of the platform, as opposed to embedded Linux where you have full access to all the build tools and libraries and frameworks. So with QNX, like I said, license, it's I guess you can say it would be more obscurity because a lot of people don't have access, but now with more and more research, there's more and more access. And now we can see that BMWs run a Pentium Celeron at the least. So fun stuff, right? There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to any embedded device, any product that you're assessing. And again, we're talking about whether that be an IoT device, and I guess a vehicle is a type of IoT device, but there's probably I think over 60, 70, or 80 different microcontrollers and ECUs in a vehicle, different in-vehicle networks. In this case, even with BMW, they're running Ethernet. So they plugged in USB to Ethernet and got an IP address for like a debug interface. Again, debug testing always seems to be the trend, and it's about finding and sifting through and seeing how you can get the same access as a developer, basically. And all you need is just one issue, one bug, one problem, within the development of the product itself. In this case, they found that issue, and the same thing. It's that kind of defense in depth approach is what you should be having. Anybody know Drake? Yeah? Probably not. Okay. So I'm going to close off with kind of the proactive things that maybe manufacturers should be doing is getting down to the basics, removing dead code, removing potential backdoors. Working on access management, identity access management. I know a big thing within again, automotive is mobility and identity within mobility. So keeping that fluent throughout the in-vehicle networks, as well as the mobile app, as well as the cloud infrastructure. Same thing goes for IoT devices as well. We have different developers responsible for different aspects of the product, whether that's startup, shutdown, querying the current function, whatever feature it may be. Again, a lot of cooks in the kitchen is how I referenced it earlier. And it's hard to, kind of bring together one product, one device, a lot of different code bases, a lot of different styles, a lot of different backgrounds, different partners and suppliers, all within the development supply chain. Again, defense in depth is something that you want to shoot for. Hardware-wise, firmware-wise, wireless-wise, whether it's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. Again, as an example, vehicles have a huge attack surface that they didn't have before. And now, code that was once expected not to be exposed is being exposed and being exploited, and will continue to be. And it's not a bad thing. It's just, matter of fixing the issues, working on the maturity and the culture of research and of researchers, and enabling and encouraging, people like us to, keep finding bugs, especially when we have enough, resources and tools and hopefully, the knowledge is acquired to start testing, and especially for manufacturers, again, like continuous testing. You definitely need to keep testing and testing. I know usually they're siloed off, right? I talked about some developers are, focused on one specific feature. Others are focused on, firmware update as an example. And, I know the in-vehicle guys don't talk to like the telematics guys, and vice versa. They're like, oh, they're the IT guys, we're the product guys. We don't talk to each other at all. But creating that culture within a company, and again, not only through automotive, but any industry vertical, and enforce some sort of continuous security testing, whether that be through source code, whether that be through dynamic testing. We have, again, for consumer, for ARM and MIPS, a ton of tools to emulate. Again, we don't want to buy hardware if we don't have to. So definitely make use of those. And my last but not least, like I was doing earlier, totally just get lost in the sauce. Find some bugs, find some issues, get into it, put some music on if you're a girl, put your hair in a ponytail, figure it out, get it done. And again, have fun is basically the goal. And feel free to ping me at any time. I would definitely love to help anybody's research project. I love finding bugs. And that's it. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
So are there any questions? Several. Start right there. It seems quite bad, to be honest, from what you say. Have you got any stars on the show, any shining examples of it done very well?
I mean, there's different levels, right? Like I said, defense in depth is the idea. I think Symantec did a good job, surprisingly. They did a good job to ensure firmware was secure in a way that you can't sideload your own software. They had secure boot, and even in memory, the memory was configurations were encrypted, even, which again is not common. And they invested from the beginning, so they actually designed the product with a secure platform, as opposed to a lower margin, cheaper device with no chip to store secrets or anything like that, or for secure memory. And I think it's just well, they're selling those devices, right? I think all these devices that I talked about, the box, the Symantec, they're all around the same price, about 200 to 250. But I think everyone's learning. Only the first year, they're promising way too much, and it's just like any other security product, right? I mean, everyone's kind of the zero-day thing, the machine learning, and hopefully we'll see a turn. Again, there's a lot of guidance and documentation around how to securely code for web. You can reference OWASP's Application Security Verification Standard. Same thing for mobile. There's Application Security Verification Standard for mobile. Embedded project, the one that I help lead. And there's a ton of benchmarks for platform security. If it's on a certain commercial-based platform, a real-time operating system, that consult with the vendor, because that's definitely something that you pay for as I guess, consumer of that specific platform. But yeah, it sounds bad. It's just the claims that they're making marketing-wise are not lining up one-to-one. And we're having to, as researchers, kind of go through and verify and validate, hey, is X, Y, and Z what they're saying, is that true? And also, why is my device talking to, a number of different IPs that I don't know, for example, they talk to the third parties that I may not be aware of, and they're not upfront about that either, transparent. It's very much, a marketing data sheet that, it's just a magic kind of placebo effect when, you think you're going to keep your device secure, or your network secure and your devices, but they're false claims. But hopefully, I don't know, we'll see if that gets better as far as, they stop marketing zero-day defense, and also enforcing some, active defense through, IPSs maybe if they want, but that's all your data. If you're going to put it through a product, your data's going somewhere else too, so privacy issues. I don't know how they're feeling about GDPR right now, but that's another thing.
Hello. I have a question about the routers. Is there any brand that you've seen that have less vulnerabilities, that like either a consumer or a corporate device that you could recommend? Like,
I mean, every device is going to have issues and vulnerabilities. It's just a matter of how fast the manufacturer responds. And gladly, the manufacturers, aside from things which hasn't been researched, they've all patched the issues that we talked about, and I'm going to send some to ACES. But they all have their pros and cons, really. It's just a matter of comfortability, the usage, and again, if you're sending all your data through one device, it's again that whole situation. If you want identity protection, you have to give your social, you have to give all your details to get secure. Make your best judgment if you can, and if you have the opportunity to perform some research on the device before, I'd recommend that. But I wouldn't have a specific vendor. It's just arms race and a matter of how fast they're fixing issues that are discovered by researchers and their culture. And I think for let's say routers, like ASUS and D-Link, they got slapped in the hand really hard by the FTC over in the States. They got sued. I forgot how much, $20,000 or something like that, and have to get pen tests for 20 years, which has never happened before. But because they were false marketing that easy to secure, secure by default, which they weren't. But now regulatory bodies are kind of getting involved when it is affecting privacy and safety now. So there's kind of a plus there, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, for sure.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions right now, but I'm sure you can find our later.
Yeah, I'll be here. Sorry, guys.
Great. Thank you so much. So the next talk is going to be in about 5 minutes.
buss finns 7 timmar för varje morgon.
Jaha. Ja, du måste ha gjort fel med den. Det kan ju inte vara så där. Du måste ha gjort fel.
Eftersom jag fick med i alla fall så här.
Ja, okej. Men jag tänkte du måste ha gjort något fel i början där. Om den där jävla...
Nej, men jag gav den lite. Vi testade en annan som hittade och då såg det ut som den var lätt.
Ja. Let's go then. Det är lite av situationen.
Jag tror de som gillar det eventuellt planerar den.
All right, the next talk is going to start in about 2 minutes, so please get back to your seats. Alright guys, we're just about ready to start, so please get back to your seats, take go with the next talk. All right, guys, please join me in welcoming Sol and Sonia to the stage. All right, well, hello, everyone. Sorry, 1 second.
There we are. Well, good afternoon. I'm Solomon Sonia, and I just want to say thank you very much for coming to this talk. So it's great to be in Sweden. This is my first time, and the first time presenting this material as well. So hopefully everything will go well. So here's what to expect, and this is kind of a suggestion of things we might cover. So we'll start with an introduction and background, then we'll go into memory analysis. How can we do memory analysis? How can we do acquisition? And then how do we pivot and do better analysis into threat intelligence? And now, I kind of say this is a best case scenario, because for the most part, I'll just wave my hands a little bit, and when it's time to stop, whenever I'm out of time, I'll just go sit down in the back. And something I always include is the live demonstration gremlin, because I do live demos, and I really like doing live demos, but it's also extremely scary, because always, whenever you're at your house, you're in your lab, you work on software, everything works perfectly. As soon as you get on stage, you want to do a demo, stuff crashes. Now, if that happens, I'm sorry, I'll try and fix and recover, and if not, well, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, but we'll just see what happens. So, who am I? I was an assistant professor at the US Air Force Academy, and I just recently left that job to handle another higher priority responsibilities until I'm able to return back into my teaching. And before that, I was a research director. I also got to do summer research at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, in which we're doing research along with the Department of Homeland Security. Then I worked in intrusion response for the Air Force Enterprise Computer Emergency Response Team. I was in charge of the intrusion response, handling the entire enterprise. Then I looked at network defense, looking at all of our computer machines that could be compromised, and how do you better respond to compromises, and how do you prevent new ones from occurring in the future. Then I did software reverse engineering, software development, and degrees. Okay, so let's talk about memory forensics to start with. Now, one thing I believe is that memory forensics, take a look at how do you better protect your computer machine. Forensics memory is kind of the hardest thing to really grasp, in my opinion. And one of the reasons is it's hard to kind of search and understand what's really going on in that computer machine without the right tools, without the right knowledge to know what exactly you're looking at. But one thing to understand is that if we can perfect how do we look at memory on a computer machine, then we can actually be able to solve and extract more malware that's able to hide even our antivirus and other detection mechanisms. And one thing to understand is that every single process, everything that's going to run on that computer, whether it's an embedded device, whether it's a cell phone, whatever you're using, everything must at one point traverse memory. Thus, if we know how to look at memory, then perhaps we can understand how to better extract indicators, artifacts, and now have a better way of protecting our computer machines in the future. So here are some artifacts that we can actually capture and analyze from memory, processes, running processes that are running. We can actually grab those modules and bring it directly to the hard drive and now do better analysis on those running systems. Process heaps, the memory of a particular program. What is it thinking? What is loaded inside? Perhaps we can get an encryption key as well from the heap. You can extract that from memory. Caches, clipboard, password, unencrypted, decrypted binaries. So nowadays, whenever we're looking at malware analysis, reverse engineering, the good malwares, which is now the norm, almost all of them are going to encrypt itself somehow. And also have anti-debugging techniques, virtual machine understanding. So it makes it really hard to really know how am I going to analyze this machine. But if you know at what point to extract that module from memory, dump it back to your computer, now perhaps we can find that unencrypted binary, and now I can do better analysis on it. Files, drivers, handles, which programs are already open, all of that information is going to be stored in memory. Web browsing activity, and socket connections. A few more things that we can extract from memory. Domains, URLs, IP addresses. This I really, really, really love, because this is kind of our bread and butter with doing our threat intelligence to see like what's actually happening and what is the information behind the domains that we're seeing. Your console activity, so whenever I'm on the terminal typing in information, sometimes that console data is stored in memory. And it can be stored in memory for multiple days if you know which memory file to look at, like a hibernation file or a page file. If I know what to look for, then I can extract and see, well, perhaps how did that malware execute itself? What commands did it send itself to run, like an encryption key? Or if it's a ransomware or a crypto locker, what keys is it going to use to encrypt your computer machine? Sometimes you can extract that from memory. Crash dumps whenever we get the blue screen of death. Hopefully that does not happen here. But usually, whenever you see the blue screen of death, on Windows, of course, you're already annoyed. Usually it's hard to boot your computer system anyway. But those numbers counting up is actually trying to save an entire image of memory onto your host machine. So we can kind of extract that to see, well, what else was running, what could have been the precipice of that computer system crashing. And then hardware device information, registry hashes, keys, memory dumps. Now, there are two main types of memory analysis, online and offline. If I say online, I just mean we're looking at a live system. Like if I'm doing analysis on this computer that's running right now, this is a live analysis, a live acquisition, because it's on. And now your offline analysis is for a dead system, a system that's off, perhaps it crashed. Maybe I know this computer has been compromised with malware, so I extract the hard drive and now send it over to other people to analyze. Okay, that's a dead system. There are different ways to look at memory on both instances that we're looking at. And now if we're extracting memory, if we're looking at the memory, there are a few locations to look for. So if it's a live system, I'm going for volatile RAM. If the system is off, I can look at the hibernation file and see an exact duplicate of the memory at this current state. That's saved onto the computer machine. I can look at the crash dumps from your blue screen of death. I can also look at the page file or swap file. And here are the locations to find those on Windows machines. Now, the difficulties with analyzing memory, I was kind of mentioning this earlier. For one, the information changes constantly. So you kind of have to know, when am I going to look, when am I going to scan this actual memory system that I'm looking for. Parsing and understanding the structure is also a bit difficult. Because on a host machine, you're familiar with browsing from one file to the other, double click here or there, but memory does not necessarily have that type of browsing capability. Because it's meant strictly for the operating system, the firmware, to run whatever it needs and unload modules that are running on your computer, unload it into memory, and let things run just fine without the user knowing. That's why it's a bit more difficult to understand how do I go through memory. Except if we have the right tools, and we'll go through the right tools in the following slides, then we'll know exactly how to carry on in memory forensics. Now, if we start with memory acquisition, let's look at an online, a live system. Now, there are many, many, many tools that exist out there. I'm just keeping a small list of the ones that I've used that work really, really, really well, especially the ones that I can daisy chain or write a wrapper around so I can now automate that across an entire enterprise. So to start out with, we have Dump It. Dump It works really well. That's going to be one of the tools that we'll demo in this presentation. Mandiant has a tool called Memorize that you can use. It's a command line tool that, understanding the parameters to send in, it can do an entire dump of live memory. WinPMem, that's an older tool, but still works very, very, very well. And the same for Belkasoft RAM capture, and Mandiant's Redline, FTK Imager, and OSF Forensics. Now, if we look at these, Belkasoft RAM capture, Mandiant's Redline, FTK Imager, OSF Forensics, and there's another one, Magnet RAM capture. Also, I've released the slides, so hopefully whenever you get the slides, you'll see that I have a lot of hidden slides here. And that's because for each tool that I talk about up here, I actually show you the instructions to download that tool, and then the instruction on how to run it. Because unfortunately, it's not that straightforward, one tool to another, which is why I did this study, to see how do we do this, and then how do we release that to the community to make your analysis much easier and faster. And then honorable mentions. These were tools that I used, but I did not necessarily like all that well, but they still work if you like. F-Response, HB Gary, FastDump. The reason I do not use HB Gary is because it has a 32-bit and a 64-bit. The 32-bit is free, 64-bit, I believe you have to pay money. So I was like, no. FastDump, that's an, oh yeah, we just spoke about that one. Mantech, MDD, that's an older file. That one I kind of had harder trouble finding. SAND has an entire SIP, SANS. They have an entire SIP framework that works well. If you want to establish a separate virtual machine to handle your analysis, you can use that. PMDump, older tool, and then LiveKD, that's under sysinternals. Very, very nice using sysinternal tools. However, this one was like, punt, I'm not even going to look at this one anymore. Because I tried to run it and it was not straightforward. You need other dependencies and requirements. So I was like, it does work. I know it's worked in the past, but since it was more difficult to establish the analysis, I was like, no, I'm not going to use it. We will use these other tools that are open source and free to carry on our analysis on our image acquisition. Oh, sorry, and one thing to mention is that I do the same thing in multiple tools, because as an investigator, you should never be too dependent on a single tool. Because if it works today, what happens tomorrow when that tool is deprecated? Or what happens when the company realizes that, oh, this is a really good tool, we should start charging for that. And now you have to pay money, and they know. Just go back to your other free tools and continue on. At least I like to start for free because it's free. Now, if we look at acquiring memory, so this is just one of the tools that we'll do a demo on today. We'll dump it, and then that's the link if you actually want to download this tool. So with dump it, you launch it from your command prompt with administrator privileges, or you can also just double-click. You enter in your administrator credentials, and then you press Y. That's all you have to do. Dump it does the rest to dump an entire image of RAM and everything that's going on at the present state of that computer machine. So here's another screenshot of what it looks like as it runs, and when it's finished, you'll have two files. One is a .dmp, your memory dump file. That's going to be as large as the RAM on the computer machine, and then a JSON file. The JSON file gives you metadata about what's happening on the computer machine, like the computer system's name, I believe there's time and other data. If you look at the notes in the slide, you'll see an example of whenever I ran this on my computer machine of what that JSON file looks like. In fact, let's do a demo then. We're getting right into demos, let's see. Okay, so here we are. This is just a Windows 7 machine, and we have dump it, and then we will be using volatility to handle our analysis. Love volatility a lot, it's a good tool. Okay, so to start dump, you can either run it from the command prompt, or you can double click, and then enter in your administrator password. Okay. So this comes up, it says, do you want to run? We press yes, and then it does the rest. Now this might take some time, so as it's going, we will come back to it, but that's it. Now we're able to dump the entire memories into this one single dump file, and then we can analyze that further. You can send it off to another machine, you can send it off to other people to analyze, or you can analyze it locally on this computer machine. All right, so welcome back. Okay, additional memory analysis acquisition tools similar to what we mentioned earlier, and this is the only other one that we added, was the magnet RAM capture. So that's a GUI tool. All of these are user interface tools, and these ones, command line. Okay, now let's talk about offline acquisition of memory. So there are a few places that you can look for. One is that hibernation file. So the last time that the computer system went into hibernation file, perhaps it's been on for a while and it goes into sleep, it's been sleeping for a while, it goes into hibernation mode. Then you can actually extract this entire hibernation file to analyze what was happening at that present time before it went to sleep. That's just instruction on how do you enable hibernation file on your computer machine. Now, here, I included another helper tool. Because if you are trying to extract a hibernation file on the current machine, like this computer has a hibernation file, I've hibernated it in the past, I want to extract that hibernation file or do like a copy or something, Windows will not allow you to do that by default. But with some searching and some coffee and some expletives, then we found the actual tool that can actually allow you to just copy that off for you. And now understand, the hibernation file is a compressed file. So we'll first have to decompress that hibernation file, and then we can do analysis as before. Okay, another place that we can extract memory is the Windows page file. So the Windows page file, this one is a bit different animal to understand. So the page file happens whenever a process or more memory is needed than the actual RAM that is present on the host operating system that's running at the current time. Well, it actually swaps information between RAM and then the hard drive. So to each process, it's seamless that it has infinite RAM. But really what's happening is the operating system is handling context switching between RAM, volatile memory, and then using your hard drive space to offset and have additional RAM for you. But a difficult thing about analyzing the page file is it's not a contiguous memory dump as like your hibernation file or your current system RAM. Because it's pieces, like anytime a process needs extra RAM, then pieces of that process is now stored into your hard drive. But one cool thing you could do to look through that page file is you can run cat. You can run a concatenation command, you can run a type command. I'll be releasing a separate tool called Xavier. I just programmed it like a few hours ago in the back. But Xavier will allow you to enter in like regex expressions to see, can I extract like URLs, domains, HTTPs, different types of keys from that page file itself. But you can just run a normal strings on a page file and see what's actually present on that system. Now, let's see, real quick, if we go back into the, it's gone. Well, all right, so that'll be the first demo. Okay, that's okay. We have it back up. You did see the command prompt up, right? The command prompt. Interesting. Coming in? You usually have to say something. Maybe I clicked, and perhaps that's what happened. Because if I look now, these two files were created, and one of them should be a dump file, and the other should be a JSON file. Yeah. So these are actually the outputs. I just expected to press something, and then it should go away. Yeah, but yes, that's correct. So we do have this memory image has been saved from this virtual machine, and it's a 4 GB file. So then we'll go into analyzing what we actually have. Now there are different tools that exist to now allow us to analyze the memory sample. So first we do a dump of memory. Now we need to analyze it. Extract processes, what socket connections existed at the time. Perhaps there are DLLs, what malware samples can we dump directly from memory. And that's why we go into the analysis portion of our investigation. Now there are different tools that you can use to handle this analysis. Recall, that's a really, really good tool. Recall, in fact, came out first before volatility. So volatility is like a brother to recall. Except recall runs, from my experience, it runs really, really well on like a Unix, Linux system because it's just multiple Python files. But I kind of wanted a standalone executable so that I can then daisy chain or write wrappers around that tool to help me enterprise it across an entire enclave. So we'll do our analysis using volatility. But other tools that you could use is Mandiant's Redline. That too is a great tool to run. It's a user interface. If you like GUIs, that's perfect. To me, I like command line. I like everything in black and white text. So I'm like, it's an interface. So I don't use this one, but you can, especially if you're just getting started. Use Mandiant's Redline. YouTube, Mandiant Redline. You'll see how people are setting it up, how to establish it on your computer machine, and then you can go from there. SANSIF framework, we mentioned earlier. FTK Imager can be used both to extract a memory image and also to analyze what's going on your computer machine. And then we will do our analysis with volatility. So here we go. With volatility, there are some pros and cons with it. So one, it's a very, very feature-rich investigation framework. It is open source, so you can make changes to it, you can see the code, you can learn from the code, adapt and use it as best fits for your environment. It's command line interface. As I said, I really, really, really like command line tools. One of the things I was telling my students one time, let me digress for a second. I said, there are two things that I love as a programmer, and I love seeing programs run. I said, I love blinking lights and scrolling text. He's like, why? I said, it shows progress, something is happening. So that's kind of what you get to see with volatility. You get like plenty of text and output from whatever the analysis that it's doing at the time. And then it's also continuously updated by the community. So you pretty much have, whenever there's a new operating system that comes out, volatility will then have new plugins and updated modules that allow you to carry on your investigation without having to worry about looking to a new tool. Now, a disadvantage, I love command line, some of you might not. So I don't know if command line is a disadvantage for you because there's no GUI for volatility, although you can write your own user interface on top of that. I'm thinking if I want to do that, I don't know yet. We'll see if it's worth the time. Because development, takes a lot of time. And now, it does not perform the actual acquisition for you. So I believe Recall can do that memory acquisition and then analysis, but volatility doesn't. So you have to already have a separate tool to acquire the memory dump, and now once you have the dump, then you can use volatility to carry on your analysis. So it's not a one-stop shop, but once you do have that dump, you can carry on everything else with volatility. And then it's not that intuitive if you're just starting. So without like a few how-tos or a few demos of seeing it online, it's not that initial, it's not your first program to start with, if I'm honest. But once you do understand how to use these plugins, then you're really comfortable and everything's just fine from there. I think we're going to do a demo. So here's actually some steps in which I say, let's configure our computer machine to understand some things. Because something that volatility needs, here's the next slide, profile, yeah. So we need to understand the profile that we're using for volatility. So there are different operating systems that are running, so volatility needs to know how do I go ahead and look at the kernel, your kernel linked list of all of your programs that are running, how do I know how to extract that? It's different based on each operating system, it's different based on each service pack, which is a slight variation on each operating system as well. So you have to know the specific profile, then you can load that into volatility and continue on. So that's why I put these commands here to try and help us acquire the information we need, and then we can continue on with volatility. So let's go ahead and just begin that process now. So here I am in our Windows machine. If I launch command prompts, let's go to the desktop. And then the first thing I put up was like system info, because I like that command. So if I just do system info, I want to type out the information to my desktop, my current working directory. I do system info, text. That one's going to take a few moments to run. So I will launch a separate command prompt. And then we'll use some other helper files. So what was the other one? Like operating system. Yeah, let's find out the operating system. So on one thing on Windows, we can say WMIC, OS, get. It's not that pretty. Let's save it to a text file. OS.text. And then let's do the same thing, but kind of limit exactly what we're looking for. And so that was a separate command that I put in. And that's OS get, let's see, caption, CSD, version. Oh dear. Yes. Yeah, okay. You're right. All right, I'll start over. Okay, so here we are, OS get, caption, CSD, version, value. I'll just say this to OS value, at text. And then if I want to start it. So that's just one of the outputs that we have, just really, really simple. It just allows you to see, yes, for sure, I'm in Windows 7 environment, and the service pack is service pack 1. Now on this, oh yeah, system info. So on this computer, on this terminal, I did system info, so system info gives me more information, kind of everything that happened on the computer system. So I can see its host name, Windows version once again, and then also the patches and the hotfixes. So a few years ago, I was writing botnets, and I really loved grabbing the system info, because then I'll write, how do I uninstall patches so I can kind of stay on the computer even more. So it's a gift that keeps on giving for both sides, your attackers and your defenders. Now, I believe I saved one other file. Oh, maybe I didn't. Okay. Okay, so this is also just on WMIC again. The format is not that nice here, but you can kind of, we'll look at this one later. Let's focus on this guy. Okay, so at least we understand we're in Windows 7, 64-bit operating system. Okay, so what I would do at this point is I would copy off my dump files and then my helper files here. But since that will even take some time to extract it from the virtual machine, I've already included that out here, I believe. Here. Yeah, so I have the memory. I just renamed it memory.dump on this side because it's easier to type. And then the files that we're looking at. Oh, not every file. Yeah, so we have the OS value, and then system info, and we'll create the other files in a second. Something else I did not show that will help us, let's do it out here. Okay. With volatility, for us to know like the actual plugins that we want to run, if you launch from a command prompt, volatility-h, and then once it runs, it should show its help file, which then gives you like all of the applicable plugins that I can run on that computer machine. Let me start that over. Let's hope that help file comes out just fine. Yeah, there we go. I must have typed something wrong, I think. Okay, so if we're looking at the help, these are the help options, and I just loaded into a text file so we can kind of scroll and see text differently. Now, these are all the supported plugins for volatility. and then it gives you an explanation of here's what each of these do. And now what I would recommend, one of the best ways to become proficient at this type of analysis is to go off and to do it on your own. Look at each command, run it, and then see the output, and say, oh, is this helpful for me or not? Now you can start to daisy chain the actual plugins that you like to help you in your analysis in the future. So in particular, I will look, I care for like the clipboard, what was actually in the clipboard, what did the user control see, that's stored in memory. Command line, what was in the command line, and command line scan, what was actually, what programs ran, and then what information is still resident in memory that we can analyze. Connections and conscan, so these work really nicely for Windows XP. And this pretty much tells you the actual sockets and the connection that you had open previously, and then also the program that ran establishing that socket connection. But it's okay, because on like Windows 7 and above, perhaps Windows 8, we can just use NetScan to help us find out what sockets we're running, then we can do further analysis from that point. Console, see the history in the console, like whenever you press up or down, what's there. Kind of some good ones. Let's see what else, which other ones do I really like using. Handles, what files were opened, and then which process had a handle to that file. So you can see if there's a program that's enumerating the entire computer machine, then it usually has a lot of handles, or you can see it changes its handle, which file is it currently looking at, or which directory. Hash dump, glorious. So if you want to grab the hash dump of a particular file, try this. Try hash dump, see if you can get those hashes, and then even just Google the hash. And many times that MD5 might actually come up to show you, hey, here's a match for what the keys that could be used to constitute a hash. In other places, you just use Mimikatz to do that for you also. A lovely tool as well. Okay, so I'm just looking at other things that you could use. Memdump, if I want to dump a particular memory from a specific process, or just look at memory space. I want to dump a segment of memory, I can use memory dump. Let's go down. PS list, we'll do a demonstration on that. So this gives us the running processes that were on that computer machine at the time. And then prop dump, this is, I mean, the first time I did this, I was in heaven, because I didn't know you can actually extract all these things. So with prop dump, I can enter in the plugin prop dump, I can give the process ID, specific process ID, and then I get that same module from memory onto the computer machine. Now you can grab that and do reverse engineering on that, or you can upload onto other places like VirusTotal. You can Google this MD5 and see, hey, is that a compromised system? Or a compromised program, and things like that. Okay, I think that's enough for now. So let's go through and just do a demo on some of these. So the first one we'll take a look at, let's do, did I do info? I don't think I've shown you info yet. Let's do this guy. If we run, so we ran the -H, so you see all the models that are applicable. Now we'll do the info command, which is --info. And we'll save that to info.text. Hopefully this finishes without error. Okay, now let's take a look at the info file. Sorry. Okay, so in the info file, remember I was speaking before that we have to understand the profile of each machine that we're analyzing. So this tells us all the profiles that are applicable for this current volatility sample. So based on the operating system, like we are going to use Windows 7, let me go down, Windows 7 Service Pack 1, 64-bit. So we'll come over here and copy this, and now this is a specific profile that allows volatility to know how do I go and extract various artifacts from memory. Then you have additional address-based information at the bottom, and then the plugins that we saw before, that is included here. And now something that's also good is volatility works both on Windows and Linux, Unix-based machines. And that's about it. That's about the main ones that I use it for. So now we have our helper files created. Let's start to do some analysis on this. So the first one to do is command scan. So let's see what commands could have been run, and then what information was spewed out from that process from the command line. Because I just ran a few right before I'm coming here. So let's do this extraction. Let's do volatility. Then we enter in the -F for the file that we want to look for. We give it the path to the memory dump. So again, I extracted it from the virtual machine. I just renamed it memory.dmp so you don't have random Windows and the host file name that we're looking at. Then the plugin that we want to use is command scan. Let's start with this one. Now we have to enter in the profile, so that's dash hyphen profile equals, and then a specific profile that we were running. Let's go up. There we are. I'm just going to copy that. Profile, and then let's pipe it to command scan.txt. So now all Toolkit is running, it's looking through the entire memory sample, and then whatever it finds, it's going to store onto the host machine here. Now sometimes it might take a while, especially based on how large that memory image, or the memory dump that we're looking at, based on how large it is. So we'll just wait a few moments. Okay, it just finished, there we are. Now if we look at command scan, so this is the file that was created. This is everything that was stored from memory for different commands that were run. And you can actually see that these were the commands that I ran right before coming over here. So we have task kill. When I had wind patrol running, I got annoyed at this pop-up, so I killed it. And you can actually see the commands that I used to kill. I did a ping on Google, looked at my network state, R, route, all this information, and system info. So this is really nice. I'm surprised at all this information that's still remnant in memory, even after you've closed those programs, after you've closed the console. Some of these things still linger. That's why it's important to understand, how do I do this so I can do better analysis on my computer machine? Because whenever you're doing forensics, you know a system might be compromised. You never really know what was this initial infection attack vector, or you never really know what other things it's using, so you have to go and find the clues. This is one of the ways to find the clue, then you can start to get on the right path to really understand what's happening. Okay, let's look at another one. So besides command scan, let's look at the console. Command line. So that's just going to be command line.text. And whenever it's finished, that didn't take too long. So now what we're seeing is a particular process, and then the command line executions to start that process. So again, this is really nice for the way you think about starting a particular program, or even starting a malware. So if you don't always know what was your initial IP address, or the domain that malware is trying to reach out to, how was it started, encryption keys perhaps for ransomware, cryptolocker types of attacks, you can try and see if you have it here. Because if you can figure out the key that was used to encrypt that system, then perhaps you can start to immediately extract, give the key, and now you don't have to pay whichever country so many millions or hundreds of thousands or $50,000 or whatever it is to unlock the system. Kind of as you were mentioning, what were the people? The Vikings that would come and occupy a place, the first ransomware? Yeah, so now you can find out the actual keys that were used on your digital ransomware as well. Okay, so all these programs and then the command line parameters that were used to start each program. All right, now we're getting better. I really like this. I hope you're comfortable with the command line, the text. Sometimes that's what analysis is. It's not glamorous, but you know how to do it well. It's top of it. Okay, let's look at the network scan. Net scan. So if we do the network scan, then hopefully this will tell us the actual sockets that were established. Is it still running at the time of the memory dump? Has it closed at a previous time? And then the process that was responsible for each connection, if it was still resident in memory at the time of this dump. So this should be the file as it's analyzing our memory dump. And we wait a little longer to finish. There we are. Right, now what we're seeing is the offset in memory that we have. This is important to know the offset. So in case you want to go back and dump a specific memory section, this is the offset that you use to enter in for your memory dump command. So it's glorious, it's lovely that it's just right there for you. Okay, the protocol is a TCP or UDP type of protocol. The interface IP address of the host machine whenever something was running, and then the foreign address that it connected out to, and then the owner. So this is the actual parent process that was responsible for each connection. So similar to your netstat, but if you're not able to run netstat, or this is like a hibernation file that we're looking at, now you can go back in time and see what was running at the instance of this memory dump. And one of the things I would do is I would extract like these foreign addresses, and I'll throw it into our threat intelligence system to see like, are these connections good or bad? Because perhaps you can find a nefarious connection just by looking at your network scan. Oh, PS list. Did I do PS list? Just one more, and then we'll move on to threat intelligence, because that's how we tie these things together. Okay, so for the interest of time, I should have that saved on my computer machine here. This is just this exact process list that was running, system name, and then the process ID. So we can use the process ID, that's going to be important for whenever we want to actually dump that module directly from memory, so now we can do further analysis. Now, understand, whenever you are really reverse engineering a malware sample and the authors were at least decent at writing that malware is going to be encrypted. That malware is also going to be virtual machine aware. However, if you can get it to run on a real solid machine, freeze the machine, dump RAM, now perhaps you can be successful at dumping the decrypted module directly from memory. And that's why this is a really important, really useful command. I can't stress it enough. It almost makes me want to shed a tear. Okay, so I just want to go back. Okay, so I don't have one dumped here. So that's good. So if we look at this process list, I will just choose any one of these, like let's say Chrome, for instance. I think I had Chrome running. Okay, like this one. So its process ID is 936. Now let's go over. Let's go back to our volatility instance, and let's use the command proc dump. Proc dump. Then we use -p for the process ID. And what was it, 936? 936, I don't need to do anything here. And now hopefully if it finds it, it's going to save it as executable. I see an error. Oh, right. You then also have to specify the dump directory. So we'll say dump -dir dump the directory. And I'll just say use the present working directory for /. Let's try and dump again. And hopefully you can find that process. Yay. So now we have an executable here. Now what do we do with that executable? Again, we can send it over to another type of analysis machine. I can upload this onto VirusTotal, which is really, really, really good to see like what are your initial indications of a particular file. Is this file malicious or not? Well, you can already start to analyze that right now just by dumping the process. So I can't stress enough how useful that command is. And there are so many other things that we can do with volatility itself. I want to show you, there are some cheat sheets that are out there. These are like the best two that I found. In fact, I think I have them. Okay, so this is just a PDF of how do you get started with volatility. Here are some like initial commands. So if you forget kind of what we did here, or you just want to see additional notes on how to use volatility, you can open one of these cheat sheets and then just run the commands, type it yourself, and see how to do various things on your analysis and on your computer machines yourself. Okay, this one's a 2-page. There's another one that's a bit longer. I kind of like this one. I like this one more. And then the link to find this exact one that we're looking at is right here. Okay, so we've done our demos. Here are the commands that we ran. Now let's move forward. So if we talk about the network data, as I said, I really love right now looking at socket connections, URLs, domains, things that are typed, because now I can add that into a threat intelligence machine, and then perhaps we can find out additional artifacts or the actual malicious actors behind various campaigns and various attacks that we're doing. So let's take a moment to talk about threat intelligence really, really, really quickly. So if we define threat intelligence, one of the things that I'm kind of annoyed with other people who have spoken about threat intelligence, not here, today all these talks have been good, but other companies try and say that, hey, we have threat intel, and really they don't. It's more like threat data or just nonsense for you to pay them a lot of money in order to say, hey, I don't see any compromise on your computer machine. So one of the things I wanted to talk about initially, whenever we define threat intelligence based on my definition from the Book of Solomon, one thing is not just data aggregation. Okay, I don't just want dumps of data out there. That's not threat intelligence. And something else I'm saying is that your threat intelligence is not synonymous with your threat data. Now, to understand, multiple definitions do exist, but mine that I want to talk about with threat intelligence is that it is the production of relevant information extracted from data sources, one or multiple data sources, that can be used to instigate some sort of action. So it's intelligence when I can do an action from it. If I'm looking at a lot of people, I have like maybe some image recognition, so the faces that I have, that's your data. But what do I do with those images? Oh, I've just found a person on the terrorist list. FBI or whatever company, we just found someone that we need to investigate further. We need to tail that person, follow them further. That's your intelligence that invokes some sort of action. So that's kind of what we're looking for whenever we create a threat intelligence environment here. And I talk about it as a new paradigm in computer security because it's actually completely different in the way we've done security in the past. So previously, when we talk about network security, internet security, host machine security, you mainly have your signature-based detection and then your statistical anomaly-based detection looking at kind of heuristics or variations from a baseline. But with threat intelligence, we kind of changed the nomenclature to see like, how do I actually understand if this is an attack or if this is not an attack? Instead of looking at a signature, I'm rather looking at like indicators and artifacts, and now what correlations can we create to really tell us that we found something unique. Now, for the interest of time, I think I have 5 minutes left. I'm looking. Oh, 5? Okay. All right. So I'll have. I want more time, but it's okay. You just have to continue what we have. One thing to understand, with understanding how do you create indicators of compromise from malicious people, is to know that people are generally creatures of habit. So I kind of have two main postulates to understand that kind of helps us understand how do we develop this threat intelligence engine. So for one, if we look at the anatomy of a computer attack, like the anatomy, how do I go about attacking a computer machine? Let me ask you, you're a hacker, yes? You hack computer machines? Okay, good answer, sometimes, with permission from everyone, right? Only on your own virtual machines, of course. Oh, of course. So if I were to say, what are your steps to attacking a computer machine? Let's say he has a computer machine that you want to attack. Like, what are your steps? What are your main methodology? What do you do for that? Good? Mm-hmm. Good. Reconnaissance, what else? Mm-hmm. That's correct. So we do some sort of reconnaissance, enumeration. Perhaps I'm doing like some sort of scan on the system to see its vulnerabilities, and then we try and exploit it, right? We're trying to penetrate the machine, and after we penetrate, we do whatever we want to do, steal, destroy, pillage, whatever, paralyze, pivot to some other machine, and then hopefully we can do some sort of stealth and persistence, right, to try and hide our presence. So you're correct. So that's generally kind of our main methodology for attacking computer machines. That's good. However, I postulate that the attack methodology has actually changed a little bit. Because in the network system that I'm in charge, or I was in charge of protecting and looking at, an entire enterprise, you will not find anything from the outside if you're trying to scan our computer machines. You won't. Because we have really, really, really good firewalls, different types of architectures that are working to protect that enterprise. But yet our computers are still being compromised with malware day in and day out. That's because your attackers have changed the methodology. So here you do have your main 5 steps as before: reconnaissance, scanning, penetration, do whatever else we need, evade detection, maintain access. But on this side, we then have different ways of staging the attack. We put our attacks out there and allow the people to come to us. Think of like your drive-by downloads, your Trojans. Rachel's here, she's going to talk about social engineering to come. I'm really excited for that talk. So these are other ways that I can use to actually exploit the computer machine. But understanding your techniques can now allow me to profile you and know whom I'm actually going to go after and attack. And another postulate that I have on attackers is there are only 3 ways that an attacker is actually caught. That attacker is good, even mediocre, semi-good. There are only 3 ways that you can catch them. The first, they were probably too lazy. They're using recycled tools, something somebody else has already written. I already have a signature to detect it. Now, whenever that attacker tries to use that on another computer, my antivirus comes up and sees, hey, I have a virus. My computer was compromised. Or they were too greedy. They wanted to take too much information too fast. or they were underskilled. They just did not understand this exploit. If I launch it on the main server, that server goes down, the people know that that system has been compromised. So why are these things important? It's important because if I can understand your common methodologies, then I can be really successful at profiling you to understand your new domains, your new websites that you have created. Tomorrow, I can detect them today. Or I can detect them even before anyone has seen it because I know what I'm looking for. Okay, so let me move forward. 3 minutes? Okay. All right, I'll be fast. Okay. 3 minutes. Okay, so here's real quick some information that we can extract from every single domain that's out there. We can do is NS lookup to look at the name servers and its IP addresses that belong to each system that is responding resources to a user. We can also correlate its geolocation based on an IP address, so I can determine if I have computers that are attacking me, like where are they coming from? Perhaps it's another state, like a really, evil country out there. You can use your imagination for those. And then, really, I want to mine a lot of this who-is data, the registration data. That if you can know the registration data behind so many domains, then I can actually find who you are. And when you use the same methodology to register new domains tomorrow to attack me, I can also find you. So let's move forward. We don't have time. I have to move fast. Okay, so let's talk about a case study real quick. Because this was kind of like the bane of my existence when I first moved on to protecting entire enterprise machines. The configure virus, the configure worm, was lovely. It was bad, don't get me wrong. It impacted a lot of machines. It's still impacting machines. 10 years ago, this thing is 10 years old, it's still impacting machines. But one of the things that was so good about this configure worm was it's one of the first revolution in current affairs in which it deployed one of your first ways of seeing DGAs, your domain generating algorithms. So before the configure, before your DGAs, whenever I have a malware sample, I would hard code the domains that this malware sample is going to reach out to. So whenever I reverse engineer that sample, if I see the domains that it's reaching out to, I simply black hole the domain, I sync the domain, so now that command and control is severed. And then if I'm looking across the entire enterprise, I can see other people that are trying to go there, I now have a compromised machine. But with configure, on a daily basis, that bad boy, one single sample can generate up to 50,000 different domains. One sample. Your sample that your computer is compromised with is different than your sample. So that means on a day, you will generate 50,000, you will generate another 50,000, you'll generate another 50,000. So already we can have 1 million domains that we want to analyze. But without understanding, well, who are the people behind these domains? Previously, we would just block as many as we could. Whenever our block list gets full, we delete the old ones and we add the new, which was a bad way of looking at things. Instead, if we know exactly what to mine, and we know exactly which type of indicators to look for, then I can actually discover here are the real people that who are responsible for these types of attacks. 2 minutes left. Two? Okay, all right. Okay, so I would like to introduce you to Excalibur. So Excalibur is a tool that I developed, and in fact, Excalibur TIE, Threat Intelligence Engine, becomes responsible for doing a lot of attacks, a lot of analyses and correlations to various sites out there to bring in additional data for us to analyze. Now, when I first created Excalibur, I created Excalibur back in 2013. And then I submitted it to a few conferences saying, hey, I think we're onto something new with Excalibur. And what I found was a lot of conferences were like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And it was kind of disappointing. I was like, look, I guess it's too soon to talk about Excalibur. So I actually tabled Excalibur for 3 years. I was like, I'm going to leave this right now. I will try this again in 3 years. Last year, 2017, because I created in 2014, 2017, I was asked to speak at a conference. I was like, this is 2017. Perhaps it is time to talk about threat intelligence again. So the new Excalibur was born. Now, I'm not going to do one demo, but I'll talk about another one real quick. So here I was. Just another case study real quick. I'll show a picture, and then I'll be finished. Almost there. Just 1.5 minutes. Okay. Okay, so here I am, 4 a.m. in the morning, and I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Why am I up still at 4 o'clock in the morning? Because as a software developer, I use the famous last word. Surely this won't take long to come to a stopping point. And now it's 4 o'clock in the morning. However, this fateful morning was significant. Because I saw on my Twitter feed that this was an entire company, and I actually retweeted from that company, Clear Sky. So I'm not bashing Clear Sky, they did a good job with the analysis that they performed. So they said, given these domain sets, just random domains out there, we have found the actual attackers that are responsible for all these domains. And here are the people and the, I guess, the artifacts, the indicators of compromise, such that if you see these in the future, you know your computers are compromised with this particular intrusion set. And then they called it Charming Kitten. So me, I look at that, I'm like, oh, good. Here's a domain set specific to a malicious actor. So I created Excalibur. I did not have a guide. I just said, well, I think this will be good. I think this will be good. And I developed it. So then I took their exact malware random domains. I threw it into Excalibur. I said, Excalibur, go do, and let's see what you will come up with. So I will show you kind of what that looks like at this point. So I'm going to go into this one. Let's stop this. So if I run Excalibur, this is available. Actually, no, this version is not available yet. On Sunday, when I'm finally home back in the US, you will have this new version, because the old version is still up there since last year, because I've been developing this thing. So just real quick, I'm loading the actual intrusion sets that the other people said. I'm adding it to Excalibur, and I'm saying, Excalibur, you find the linkages, and let's see how good you are compared to the entire company in which they're finding the indicators. Because if at least we can discover the indicators, then now we know tomorrow if that same person uses the same techniques to establish new domains, then we found them. So whenever you launch Excalibur, you're going to have like various files. Sorry, I don't have time to talk about what each file is, but a few things you can click on. So I wrote a few APIs. So if you do want to know like where does each connection that's coming to you on your network, whenever you launch Excalibur, give it files to analyze. You can click on each one, and then you can kind of see all of its who is data and who is information. Then I add more, because I include the IP addresses and also its geolocation, which is not standard in your normal who is. But now let's go to your main indicator summary. No, not that one, this one. Okay, so I'm using a mouse because whenever I look at an indicator and I think of how do you correlate indications together, this is kind of how I see it. So real quick, I create like various decision trees. And so based on this decision tree, you as a person can see Excalibur said this is a particular indicator you need to be cognizant of. So if you accept this, you can then publish to the Excalibur intrusion detection system that I'll also be releasing on Sunday, so you can have a better analysis and protection of your computer. But for instance, if we look at, so we look at this tweet, I think they mentioned, you can't see it here, but it's like Isabel something, Isabella whatever, was like the main indicator that the entire company said was responsible in this intrusion set. So whenever I load into Excalibur, I was like, Excalibur, do not disappoint me, my child. Let's see what you can find. So if we look here, this is the Isabella person that entire company also discovered. So Excalibur actually found it. So again, there are so many domains, and ones that are not applicable, Excalibur goes away to only focus on your indicators of compromise. So here, if I'm looking at it, this is Isabella that entire company discovered and said, hey, this is that. So I can use this in the future. Anytime a new domain is discovered, okay, 40 seconds.
20 seconds.
Okay, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. I will be fast. Okay, so in the future, anytime this person uses the same information to discover new domains, then I can immediately detect it and say, hey, this is bad, because I know there are links to previous badness in the past. So in the future, if I see this, I can immediately stop. But one thing the company missed, and I was so surprised, I did not see it. Or I did not see it in their report. So Isabella has like a 3% representation, which is pretty significant, even though it's only 3. But that's actually showing that out of a lot of random domains, we did find a correlation. But from Excalibur, we then found there's a 50% person here that's even worse than everybody else. And I'm saying, how come the company did not see that? But truly, we're onto something unique. Okay, and then we have various indicators that we can release, and then you can publish this onto the intrusion detection system that we just did not have time to talk about, but I think I'll blog about it, so at least we'll have an idea. And if you have any questions, I'll be around here, so let me wrap up. We'll just stop here. So that's where the GitHub code will be. Any questions? No questions? Well.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but thank you so much. And as we said, I'm sure you'll be around during the dinner afterwards if you want to talk to me even more. Great, thank you. Right, so just some quick information. A few of you probably planning on going back to Stockholm at some point. I just want to let you all know that SG has cancelled all train traffic between Gothenburg and Stockholm for the entire weekend because of the heat. Those who are traveling with MTR, apparently that still works for some reason. And those who are flying are fine. So if you need a place to crash, talk to these people. All right, so it's almost time to get Franz on stage. I think I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Yeah, so yeah, it's time for Franz, so give him a warm applause.
Jag kan ta det. Jag kan ta dina sådana också. Du lägger inte använda dem. Nej, jag vet inte. Ja, gör det. Jag behöver bara en. Glassen. Men då kan jag gå in. Om jag inte använder dem kan jag ju ta med dem. Jag var inne på kontoret. Ja, vi får se. Inget fokus, va?
Tack för idag.
Bra jobb, bra.
Det var riktigt kul faktiskt.
Ni missade det enda som jag tjatat om.
Jag är ledsen.
Jag förstår.
Bakfyllan har kickat in.
Bra jobb.
Samma.
Vi hörs på måndag.
Okay. All right, let's, we're getting really close to beer. So I will, there's going to be one talk after me, so I'll try to speed it up so you guys get some more time. Okay, so I'm going to talk about breaking policies and specifications. And the thing is, I basically have one story I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about a problem I've been identifying, which is not really related to the story, but the idea is that there are similar things in it. After this, there's also a secret. So I'm going to give away a secret. Last year, I did a talk here. I also gave away a modification of an old hacking tool. But now this is just an experimental tool to find a specific thing. But I will talk about that later. So my name is Franz Rosen. I've been talking here 2 years. This is the third time. I do a lot of live hacking events. So I actually get invited to events going out and hack a specific company, and then we compete with other hackers. So it's like a game, but you also help a company. Me and Matthias went and competed as Team Sweden, and we won, which was awesome. We crushed Team Belgium so hard. That was our only purpose with the whole trip. So, the idea that I'm going to talk about first is it's a story about Let's Encrypt and how I killed one of the specifications related to Let's Encrypt. But the story begins with a totally different thing. I was sitting a day in January, 9th of January actually, on the night, I was hacking a company that you might know of called GitLab. GitLab is an open source source code version control system, web-based basically. And they have like a responsible disclosure, you're able to hack them, and I was invited to take a look at the code. The thing was, what I started to look at was not the application itself where you run it locally and you have your own instance. Instead, I was looking on the specific cloud service they use, gitlab.com. GitLab.com is a bit different from the app. And the difference was something called GitLab Pages. If you don't know what GitLab Pages is, it's basically like GitHub Pages. It's the same thing. But the cool thing is, basically you're able to develop a website and you can point your domain to that website and you can serve, like on docs.example.com, you can serve your documentation. And that documentation is in GitLab, so it's in version control. When I started looking at it, if you saw my 2 other talks, I'm talking a lot about like subdomain takeover, being able to take over domains because they don't use any domain validation. This was the case for GitLab actually. They did not use any domain validation. That was the first fun trick. So that means that if someone pointed their domain to GitLab, you could go in and say, this is my domain, and you can serve whatever you wanted on it. The thing, the way you saw that was basically, the site showed this, a 404. If you went to the actual domain. And I wanted to tell them that. But the thing is, how do you tell them that they're making their customers vulnerable? Like, how do you do that? So I thought, what if I take over a GitLab.com domain with their own tool? That would be pretty cool, right? You're breaking your own site because of your vulnerable system. So I tested to add like blah blah blah.gitlab.com, and that actually worked. They didn't blacklist their own domain. And the thing is, this was like the perfect recipe for me to actually find something. The problem was blah blah blah.gitlab.com didn't result to anything, so I couldn't do anything with just that one. So I had to find a domain that they were using, but was also pointing to GitLab. So the goal was basically find this somewhere. It's supposed to be somewhere. The cool thing was, I didn't have to look that much. Because when I started looking at doc.gitlab.com, that one redirected very properly from HTTP, it redirected to docs.gitlab.com. What they did here was basically realizing, okay, doc is common, but we're going to put them on docs, so we're going to make a redirect. However, if you went with HTTPS, you would see a 404. This was interesting. So I went and took doc.gitlab.com, and it worked. So I had it. I actually had the HTTPS one. So I was like super excited, and that meant that going to HTTPS, it would serve my content instead. So I went there, and no, didn't work. I got this invalid certificate. I was like, this is so close. And my attack report to them wouldn't be as fun if I go and say to them, yeah, you need to tell people, press advanced, allow, and like, you can't do that. So I was like, how can I get a certificate for GitLab.com? The thing is, when you add a domain, you actually get input boxes. Like, upload your domain here, or your certificate here, with your private key, and we will serve that for your domain. Awesome! That is super great. So I was like, okay, so if I put like if you know about Let's Encrypt, Let's Encrypt is like a automated way to get certificates. So I thought to myself, let's approach Let's Encrypt with this purpose. Basically, I can put a file on that domain and validate that Let's Encrypt that I own the website. So if you don't know Let's Encrypt, probably all of you do. It's like free certificates for everybody. They're trying to automate it. It's built by a non-profit organization. And there's like Mozilla and a bunch of organizations funding this internet security group. They have taken out, there's like 10 blessed methods, the way to get a certificate, which is decided on the browser forum, CA browser forum. So they came up with 10, Acme and the Internet Security Group decided that only 3 of them is valid for automation. Acme is like automated management certificate engine, whatever. There's like, the automation can only use these 3 methods. And they are HTTP 01, DNS 01, and TLS SNI 01. So my first project was, I knew how HTTP 01 works. Basically, what it does is, it connects to a specific URL, and it has a challenge in the URL, and if it responds with another challenge in the file, it knows it's going to validate. So I was like, this is perfect. I can actually create a repository called .wellknown in GitLab. I can create a directory called Acme challenge, and then I can create a file with the first challenge with the content of the second challenge. Everything is awesome, right? But do you remember, HTTP didn't work. Turns out that the HTTP 01 specification was changed from the beginning. In the beginning, it actually tried both port 80 and 443. But there was a lot of vulnerabilities with the actual thing I was mentioning, that HTTPS redirected to a totally different website, because HTTPS was like exotic. So they had to decide that port 80 needs to be open. That's the only way you're going to get the certificates. So couldn't use that one, which was sad. Would have been perfect and very easy way to actually get the certificates, but that didn't work. So next up was DNS01. DNS01 means that you need to add a TXT record to your DNS. And if you can't do that, which I couldn't, there's no way to use that one. So then I saw the more interesting one called TLS SNI01. The interesting part was that it was pretty hard to find, like, you can't go to Let's Encrypt and read like a documentation on how it works, because they wrote like a RFC, like IETF has published a draft on how it is. Nothing is like decided on, almost. Everything is like draft based. So I had to read those drafts, which was it's like reading specifications is maybe not something you do on a Friday night. But I did it, and I was chatting with a friend during the time on Slack, and I started reading it, and I'm like, this is super weird. I actually wrote to him, like, this is weird. And I sent him the link, and like, if this is true, this is completely fucked up. And he's like, what? What do you mean? And that's like a common discussion we have. Like, I'm thinking so much about a thing, nobody else is like, what the hell are you doing? So I was trying to explain to him, in simple words, what I read from the specification. I didn't know if this was true, but I tried to like simplify it. So the whole idea is, I want to verify example.com, right? So I say, hello, Mr. Let's Encrypt, or Mrs., I don't know. I want to validate example.com. What happens is that Let's Encrypt says, okay, that's fine, but could you, on the IP address of example.com, serve me a certificate if you ask me about this weird domain called xyz.acme.invalid, and I ask you for that domain, can you serve a certificate that you made yourself? Handwritten certificate. Okay, I can do that. And the thing is, I will now connect to example.com. And I will ask, not for example.com, I will actually ask, hello, server name indication is basically the way to communicate, this is the domain I'm interested in. And it will say, can you please serve me a certificate for xyz.acme.invalid? And then I'm stopping like, hey, wait a minute. Don't you have example.com in the discussion? You only connect to the IP, you don't do anything else? No, it's fine, Only the acme.invalid. And I'm like, this is really bad. So I was like, okay, so if I want a certificate for one domain, the only thing I need to care about in the validation process is acme.invalid. So I actually took out one of those domains that you need to serve a certificate for, and I tried it in GitLab, sorry. And it said, no, the domain must be between 1 and 63 characters long. And I was like, no, so like, everything just, no, there's no idea to do this. Like, I will not get a certificate, so I'm like, forget GitLab. There was something else here that was pretty interesting. So what I did was, I took this, it's a pretty long domain, right? It's like, I don't know exactly how long it is with acme.invalid, but it's like about 100 characters, right? So I went to two other cloud providers I know of, called Heroku and AWS CloudFront. Both of them are like supporting you to upload your own certificates, which were awesome. So basically, I just pasted in the acme.invalid domain and like to see if they maybe were blacklisting it, because if you can have that domain on them, you could basically connect to them and get a certificate for that invalid acme domain. I added them and it worked. Super interesting. So I was like, I need to test this, and I need to test this in production. Like, I need to validate that this actually works. Now I just added a domain, right? I didn't like actually approach one of the domains. So the target I had was find a cool company that everybody knows of, take one of their domain should point to either Heroku or AWS CloudFront, because since Let's Encrypt will connect to that, they will actually reach one of these. But then I will add this acme invalid to see if it will actually connect to my own app with the acme invalid with my signed certificate and therefore pass the verification method. So I went to a friend of mine in Canada working for a big e-commerce company. I will not mention the name, but it's a company that I should not have a certificate for at all. I went to him and like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but you guys have a specific domain that I could actually test if this works on. Could I issue a certificate for this one? Like, I know this is a weird question, but yeah, sure, you can. Like, yeah, we don't care about that one. And I actually gave him a list, like, these are the ones qualifying for issuing certificates. And he's like, yeah, take that one. It's like, nobody cares. Turns out, in the end, people did. So I was like, okay, I have a target. This is Heroku, and my challenge is to serve a certificate for this domain. So what I did was, there's a bunch of open source tools to actually issue certificates using this method. In fact, there were some apps, one called CertBot, built by EF, that only supported this specific method. But I didn't want to use one of these things. I wanted to understand exactly how the flow worked. So I rebuilt one of them, and this was just to make the self-signed certificate myself for the specific domain. So here you can see I'm actually inserting, now it's sun in the way. The only important part is in the sun, no. But I can put all my passwords like diagonal. No, so I put the CN, I put the domain they actually want, which was an interesting thing, because the CN, they don't care about. Like, you can upload a certificate to CloudFront and Heroku with as many domains as you like. It doesn't matter. What matters then is that you actually, in your app, add the domain. So you can have a certificate, and it kind of makes sense, right? If you have a bunch of sans, subject alternative names, in your certificate that you don't use for Heroku, you still want to upload a certificate that has them as sans, but that shouldn't mean they should be served, right? So the CN here didn't matter. I could write poop there. It doesn't matter. But the thing is, I wanted to create this self-signed certificate, and what happened when I ran this one, I actually got out the XYZ, the key for what it wanted me to validate. So I had a certificate, and I added it to my Heroku app, and I went in and I added the .acme.invalid domain for it. And I was waiting, because this doesn't take like seconds, it takes like minutes. And so I was sitting here waiting, and I was like, it would be fun if I'm like doing myself a little teaser or something. So I actually wrote like a bash script that was like an infinite loop, testing every time, and as soon as I see this one, I actually use like say, and it says like, let's see. Yeah. And I was sitting there, and suddenly I increased the volume on my computer, and suddenly, you broke the internet! And I'm like, holy shit. And the next step I did was basically I just sent one Slack message. I sent the certificate to him. And he answered me, holy fuck. Like, this is not good. And he was like, could I have done something to prevent this from happening? I'm like, yeah, you could stop using Heroku, or stop using CloudFront. And I did the same thing on a domain. The same company was also using CloudFront, so I could like use the same company to just approach them. And I saw this, and I'm like, oh, this is okay. And the time, I can actually see when I sent the report, it's like, yeah, 5 minutes to 2 a.m. On a Wednesday or something. And I wrote the whole report, like, this is the way. I issued 2 certificates, they're not mine. But I was able to do it because this is how shared hosting works. And they took them 1 hour and 40 minutes. And then they said, yeah, we believe this is actually a valid problem. And then they put up, like, we are shutting this verification method down. And then, due to this message, it turns up on Hacker News. And they're like, what the hell? People are like, what did people find? And they started like discussing all this and like, what did people actually do? What happened here? And I went to bed. I actually went to bed. And this was like before I just like closed the computer and like I tried to sleep. I woke up in the morning and I had 4 mails from Let's Encrypt. And they're like, yeah, we're pushing this today. It's gonna go out in 1 hour. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, what do you want it to say? What do you want to mention your name? I'm like, yeah, sure, do it. And like 15 minutes later, like imagine, like we're talking about a time period of 6 or 7 hours. between me reporting and them going out to say that this guy just emails us, and yeah, we put it out. Like, we put this black hole, or this verification method in a black hole, and we're gonna see how we're gonna change this. So I was super stressed, because now they went out with all the information, but I really wanted to tell my story of it. So I just hammered down the blog post really fast, like, this is how I got these certificates. I also actually went to Heroku and AWS and sent them a report, like, this is the information that is going out now. This is a blog post, I will get it out. I don't care, it doesn't matter, the verification method is gone now, so it doesn't matter. And they came back to me and like, oh, you were the friends they were mentioning. Oh, that kind of makes sense. They also paid money, which was amazing. That was not the intention with reporting to them. So they basically paid me for telling them I'm gonna blog about them. Super weird. The cool thing after this was, Let's Encrypt like fiddle around with, they had like a pretty open discussion on how they were supposed to do in the future with this verification method. The fun part was that they had a new specification called TLS SNI 02 upcoming. But the problem was that that one was just as broken as this one. Like, that one did not solve, it solved another problem, but not this kind of problem. And that one never saw the day of light, because they came out and said, we will sunset both these methods completely. We will never use them. Bye-bye TLS SNI 01 and bye-bye TLS SNI 02. The funny thing was, after this, everybody was waiting for something by Let's Encrypt called wildcard certificates. Wildcard certificates was basically like one of the first reasons a lot of big companies did not use Let's Encrypt in the beginning. Basically, you could not get a star.example.com certificate by Let's Encrypt. And they were announcing to do this in February. And they actually went out. Let's Encrypt have never broken a deadline in their whole existence of 2.5 years, 3 years. Except because of me, obviously. This is the recent deprecation of TLS SNI actually delayed the whole wildcard thing. People were upset, mostly on Twitter, because companies had decided that we're going to move over to wildcard certs for Let's Encrypt, so they never renewed their existing wildcard certs, which meant that they were like, that's perfect, February is awesome. And then they were even like, no, it's going to be a couple of weeks, we don't know. So I think this explains why I got a bunch of flowers from all the certificate authorities, except Let's Encrypt, when this happens. They're like, thank you, everybody bought wildcard certificates from us. On Twitter, people are like, yes, this would be the first day of the wildcard, but they want this delayed. No ETA. And a friend of mine goes out and like, yeah, that's Franz Rosen, the bearer of bad news. The cool thing is they will probably get a lot better. So that's basically the Let's Encrypt story. There's some fun stories also regarding the other verification methods, but I don't have time to actually cover these in this talk. The next thing I'm going to talk about is something else regarding policies and specifications. I haven't seen that much information being posted about this. So this is a very, I wouldn't say it's unknown, it's just that some people have not been talking about this as much as people should, because this thing is broken as hell, and it's so easy to do wrong. The whole idea with upload policies is basically like, we now use cloud storage instead of actually putting files on your server. It's awesome, but the problem has always been, you need to get the file first. Someone uploads the file, you get the file, but you want to use this external file storage, the S3 buckets on Google Cloud or on Amazon. So you basically get the file and then you transfer it over to S3, which is double the time, right? It takes so much time to, if it's large files, it's a mess. So they come up with a thing where basically they sign a policy, server side, they sign it with their secret key. The policy says what's allowed to be uploaded to this bucket. And what happens is, as soon as you do that, you can upload on client side directly to the bucket. It's awesome. It goes really fast, and you don't need to think about like transferring a file double the time. The problem is it's super easy to do wrong. And the thing is, every time you talk with pen testers, they're like, what is the feature you start looking at first? Everybody's like, file upload. Always file upload. You upload a shell, you name it .gif, but it's a .NET shell, and everything is good, right? So this is like awesome. We can now isolate our files on a sandbox domain. They can't get to us. And this turns out to actually not be great. So the thing is, an upload policy looks like this. It's basically you're posting directly to one bucket. Works exactly the same way, both with AWS and Google Cloud. In this post request, you have the file content, you have the file name, and you have a base64 encoded policy. The policy looks something like this. It's basically saying like, when should it expire? What's the conditions on the file that you're allowed to upload? So it says, what bucket can you upload this to? And what should the file name start with or contain? Or it's like, what should the file name be? Or you can have this loose thing, like it's at least gonna start with this content. You could also say the access control layer, if it should be publicly read by anybody, or if it should be private, then you need to sign a URL to see it. And you can also like have the content type start with something, and also you can specify the length of the content. This policy, I would say every line on it is vulnerable to some form of broken policy. It's so easy to do wrong. First of all, if you have a start with the key, meaning the file name, and it does not contain a path separator, you can actually host files on the root of the bucket. Sounds like not that bad, right? But the thing is, one of the criteria to install a service worker is that you can put files in the root folder of the domain. Installing a service worker on a sandbox domain is just as bad, because you can have a service worker. Matthias actually made a talk about this on SecT last year. You can actually have a service worker, or the old little brother of service workers called app cache, that if you visit this sandbox domain and you visit my file, I will install a service worker or an app cache in your browser. So anytime you download anything from this sandbox domain, that URL gets sent to me. It's a silent attack to harvest information. And you can actually, service workers are a bit of an upgrade than app cache. App cache, you can say, nah, don't expire at all, basically, which is crazy. Service workers has like a built-in refreshing timeout. However, if you have that worker still on the site and accessible, it can just renew itself. So having files in your root folder of your bucket, don't do it at all. Another issue with this is that if you have starts with and the key, and that key basically contains nothing, or contains the same value for all your users, they can basically replace any other file. So you can modify other people's documents, because that's the policy. You can just break the policy, right? Oh, I can put whatever I want on any file URL on this bucket, which is awesome to attacking, changing images to something completely different, right? Another issue is like the content type. If you have an empty content type, you can of course, like, this should be a text HTML. Kind of makes sense. So you can, depending on the content disposition, you could have basically an XSS. And remember, the XSS is not as bad here as the ability to install a service worker on an app cache. The other thing is, you don't need to have an empty content type to bypass it. Because if you provide it first with a valid content type image JPEG, you can provide it with a Z, like image JPEGs, and then a semicolon and text HTML, and it will be served as text HTML. So the whole thing starts with content type basically means whatever content type you want. There's another way to upload data into these buckets. One solution is called AWS STS. And STS is basically an idea. It's moving slowly across. Okay, it says generates temporary credentials client side. That sounds weird. But the whole thing is basically you create the IAM role in your organization, and then with the same thing really. So the policy can make you generate AWS keys. And you can then use those AWS keys to make authenticated requests. And every time we've seen this, they have like S3:* or EC2:*. which is like the worst thing ever. That means that when you generate these tokens with that policy, you're basically getting AWS tokens to take over all their servers. So the whole idea, the whole road thing is basically you're pointing with a token, web identity token, to the SDS, Amazon AWS, and in return you get temporary credentials for AWS. And you can use AWS CLI to basically just like, this is in my environment right now, give me all your S3 buckets, and then you just get all the S3 buckets. It's because of this broken policy. We actually reported this as Team Sweden for one of the companies, and they were like, okay, you got all our source code, you can read all the source code, you can replace all our binaries, and all the media people have uploaded is now accessible by you. We actually did a file listing on one of these buckets, and the credentials expired before we could list all the files. So that was pretty interesting. That's a guy with a horse. Anyway, so there's other vulnerable flows. Even Google Cloud is vulnerable to the same thing. The problem is when people are building their own logic upon this thing. So I saw an example like this. Basically, this was pointing to, let's say it was a ticketing system where you could upload images. Just saying, I'm not saying it, but just say that. So you're pointing this to the ticket system, and first your JavaScript said, hello, I want to upload a file called images/test.png. And I told this to the ticketing system, and they sent back like a signed URL. This signed URL basically gave me put access to the file I was asking to upload. But the problem was, as I mentioned, we could overwrite any other file that we had, and the signed URL also allows you to read the document. So that means that even though you had private files, I could say, please get me invoice number1.pdf. And it would send me a signed link, and I would just take that invoice. And they paid a bunch of money with that, because that was like all their files was in this bucket. So that was like, okay, this is so bad. And they were changing it, basically adding a bunch of prefixes depending on who you log in as. So nobody was sharing the same context of the files. So the whole thing with building your own logic around this is broken almost every time. The goal for me in this investigation mostly has been to reach the root of the bucket. Because if you have a signed link to the root folder of the bucket, you get the file listing. If you get the file listing, you know all the files that's in there, and then you can just make another request to a file you know exists. And then it doesn't matter if they are private, because if you get a signed link, you can just download it anyway. So the goal is to reach the root, or basically reach someone else's file. And I've seen so many scary examples. So this example is basically like, they had a endpoint called getImage, and you provided a key, and we're back to the 90s, guys, and girls. I can do a path traversal to them. They would normalize the URL, and then give me a signed normalized URL for the S3 bucket. So remember, like back in the old days, like please download ... etc password. We're back. This is the same thing again. Basically, I full have access to all the object. I can see all that object, I can list them, and I can just download everything. We're back. Same thing, another service. They were basically asking, like, okay, do you want an S3 URL signature? Cool. The thing was, they were fiddling with the URL. They were taking parts of it, back and forth. So I ended up with this payload, and that gave me the root access of the bucket. The bucket name was example -beta. You can see they have like a double slash there. If you have the double slash before the bucket, it's not counted as a key, and you can get all the info in the bucket, everything. My favorite one was, actually I looked at it, it's 2 years ago. This is not a new issue. Nobody's talking about it, but it's not a new issue. So the whole logic of this site, I see Matthias now like, oh, I know what that site is. But the thing is, basically you said, I want to upload a file. And it said, okay, give me the key. And I gave, slash, it's a cool key, I want that. And basically it created something, and that was super weird. So you basically had a key and an S3 key. So the random key I put was XX11, and then I said the S3 key is slash. It gave back to me, I've created your link now. That meant that going to secure.example.com/files.myrandomkey xx11 would redirect me to a signed URL for the root bucket. This was the first time I found this, so I didn't know how bad it was, and I wanted to see how much they had in the bucket. This is an IPO company. They had one bucket. There was the company name .sread Amazon. It was a bucket name with everything they had in the whole company. Everything was in that bucket. I never got the whole file listing. I have a file that is 2 gigabytes large with just the file names. I kept it for some reason. I don't know. I'm still looking at them and like, you should patch these. These are still public, these files. So this is still very much out there. But yeah, I got the file listing, but I could never see the whole thing. So full access to all the objects. I reported it to a bunch of companies and they're like, okay, this is actually an issue. This last company I mentioned, that was 2 years ago, and they just like, this is one of the worst things we could ever like see. So they paid me like $15,000 as a bounty and $10,000 as a bonus, just because they were like, this is such a bad thing. But now you're thinking, what happened with GitLab? That is the question, right? I forgot about them. What I did was basically telling them about this domain. They didn't do anything more than just fixing this specific domain. But what happened was, I have a friend called Ed Overflow. And a couple of weeks after the Let's Encrypt thing, he actually publishes a blog post saying, I could actually use GitLab to harvest, I could add any domain I want in the whole world. And anytime they want to use GitLab and use this thing, they will now be served under my control. So he found a way in mass quantity to just add everything to this, which is not the nicest move to show a proof of concept, but that was basically the way they did. So they actually shut the whole GitLab pages down and added domain verification. One of the first companies in the history of this domain verification thing that actually, like, yeah, we're gonna fix this. I thought that I was able to do it by hacking them, as showing that they were vulnerable. No. They were focusing more on their customers, so that was the way. I actually was able to take a full account takeover on GitLab just because I was able to take this domain. I didn't even need to say to them that I couldn't get the certificate issued, because also I didn't want to get the certificate issued because that would look bad. But only by telling them, they were like, okay, this is a critical thing, we should probably fix this. I did this pretty quick, I'm actually done. Thank you very much.
I actually have a question.
No, I have one more thing.
Go for it.
Is the stream off?